Hello, welcome to part 2. Well, let's talk about Centerlink, Social Security and the gap in attitude between reality and expectation. Now, for those of you who listened to the first part of this, you would have noticed that a copy of the text messages, or the thread, if you like, on the Facebook poll that I engaged in as part of the video. I didn't realise until after I finished yesterday's video that it's actually quite blurry and you can't see it. So in the description for these videos, when they're uploaded on YouTube, the bottom link in the description will be to the actual PDF. So we'll pick up where we ended yesterday. As you may recall, it was with regards to a poll that was being done on Facebook for a current affair with regards to whether or not Centerlink payments should be changed, whether or not they were fair or it was a reasonable payment. And some people were expressing that they were struggling a little bit with what they were getting paid, what they were being assisted with. And a friend of mine had commented on that and had come up on my Facebook feed, and I felt the need to respond because I thought that his particular response seemed a little bit at odds with the reality of the situation. Now, he had mentioned that, if you couldn't get a job, if you didn't like what you were getting on Centerlink, get a job, and if you couldn't get a job, move to somewhere where there is a job. And I thought that seemed extraordinarily disconnected from the reality of the situation. But anyway, if you've listened to yesterday's video, first off, congratulations, because it was a very, very long video, much longer than I expected it to be. Second, I'm not going to repeat what was in that video. I'll just pick up from where I left yesterday. So during this conversation, after some time, Mr. Amos responded to all of my points that I had made up to this point, and then said, I assume throughout this conversation you have been using your own personal experience. What if I told you I could point you to a job in an area where there is good housing and school, childcare facilities, but you would be required to move across the country? Would you do it? Excuse me. And hey, that's a very, very good question. And my response to that was, I would certainly be open to moving. In fact, I have tried to move on a number of occasions and have previously moved for work before. However, what you are suggesting is that someone 64 years of age, which is under the pension age of 65, should move to where there is work, whether they could sell their home or not, either for a loss in a depressed local economy or continue to pay rates on a place that they cannot stay in. And if not, they have no right to suggest that it is a struggle to live on Centerlink payments hand to mouth. The reason I say that is because, obviously, particularly in rural areas where jobs dry up, it is affected by drought, businesses close, there's less and less jobs. If people were to move out of the town in search for work, obviously there's less people in town, there's less demand for housing, particularly buying housing. I don't know anyone with any fiscal responsibility who would say that it is a good idea to buy housing in a location that is losing people, unless there's some sort of long-term goal of ultimately turning that around if you felt confident that the market would improve. So you're effectively suggesting that anyone who is of working age, which obviously is anyone who's under the age of 65, the pension age, if they own their own home, and they have to, by Mr. Amos's expectations, move to where there is work, because there's no work where they currently stay, they would either have to sell their house at a loss, and it would be a loss because you won't get a high market value for a house you own trying to sell it somewhere where no one's moving, in fact where people are leaving. And if not, then they have to continue to pay rates on that premises, even though they're away and they're not living in that premises. Now that seemed like a pretty straightforward thing to me. I imagine, because of Mr. Amos's responses, he has not the slightest idea in the complexity of local economy and the impact that that can have on housing. But that's okay. Right? But, his point is that, if they don't do that, then these people, they have no right to suggest in any way that they are struggling to live on the Centerlink payments. And my response to that continues. I honestly can't think of a bigger FU to anyone who has been in the workforce, contributed to the tax system, and now cannot find work. Or to the single mother who has left an abusive relationship due to domestic violence, yet has to support a toddler or a school leaver who you are telling must relocate away from secure family, because now they not only compete with more qualified people, but people who now come from outside the local area. Now, that's the reality of the situation. If you're going to relocate away, then not only are you going to be competing for the jobs that are available with people who potentially have better qualifications than you, better skills, better experience, but you're also competing with an increased number of people, because if everyone is moving to locations where there's more work, there is an increase in those prospective job seekers. But anyway, I'll continue on. It seems a little entitled to me to talk down to people who don't have the same resources as yourself and have more risk. I think it's pretty clear Mr. Amos obviously has not faced the same sort of risks that some people would face, particularly long-term employed who no longer have work, own a house, or maybe even have a mortgage, which is a complication in itself. If you have a mortgage, how do you sell your house? How do you move away and work without having that added financial burden of rates? You could say, well, they could rent out the properties. But this is the thing. If the job prospects in that particular location is shrinking and contracting, then the demand for rent will go down. The demand for rental properties will go down. So ultimately, you're leaving someone in that position who presumably in that particular situation would have a partner, would have children, have their own house, they may be paying it off to over 20 years, they're suddenly out of work, and now you're saying they have to sell that property, which they're unlikely to be able to do in that sort of economy. Rent it out, which again is unlikely to happen in that sort of economy, or move away and continue to pay rates on a property that they can no longer maintain and can't live in. That really seems to indicate that Mr. Amos hasn't had anywhere near that experience or anywhere near that risk when he has relocated for work. And that's fine. That's his situation. My point is that talking down to other people because they are not in the same circumstance you are seems incredibly disrespectful. Now, I'll go on. I don't appreciate dole bludgers any more than anyone else. But blanket attitude and statements like, here's a novel idea to get more money, get a job. No job in the area? Move somewhere where you can get a job. Seems incredibly disrespectful to every person who has been in the workforce before you, before Mr. Amos, longer than he has, and now can no longer support themselves because there is either no work available to them, or they have lost their business because others have left the area. And that's the thing. If there is a lack of jobs in a particular location, especially a rural town, and people do leave to go chase work, you reduce the population, which obviously reduces the capacity for businesses to remain afloat because they have less and less money, spending money in those businesses, in those shops, at those service stations, all those things. Less and less people, less and less money, which ultimately puts them in a position where they have to close, which compounds the issue further and further, so that at the end of it, you have an ever-contracting economy, local economy. It's contracting further and further because people are leaving, there's not enough work, people are moving away for work, and because of that, there's less and less money in the towns, and therefore more and more businesses close, more and more jobs go. This isn't a fanciful thing. This isn't a hypothetical. This happens. This is a fact. It's simple numbers. It is simple numbers. It can be demonstrated over and over again. And if you don't believe me, go and talk to someone who's qualified to tell you about these things. Don't take my word for it. Talk to an accountant. Talk to an economist. And this is what they'll tell you. I know this sort of information because I've done business coaching. I've had these conversations. I know the impact on businesses that face these sorts of situations. So yeah, it's a compounding thing. But I'll go on. I continue to say, I would be furious if someone suggested to my father before he retired that he was a bludger if he did not find work, or if he could not find work, and no means to move. Worse, I would be embarrassed to disregard the honest people and disparage them and leave them to struggle because of the dole bludgers. Now I say that because it's pretty clear that Mr. Amos wants to lump everybody on Centerlink payments into the same sort of cliched ideology that he has. That, if they don't relocate town looking for work, then they're all dole bludgers. It's clearly his attitude. It's an attitude that he continues to repeat, even beyond this point in the conversation. Even though, as you'll see, I'll ask him to provide examples of how people can overcome these obstacles in relocating. He doesn't have anything to offer. His attitude is, well, if you can't do it, you're a dole bludger. That is pretty clear to me. Anyway, that's certainly how I interpret. And if you feel that I'm wrong about the interpretation, please explain it to me. Explain it to me clearer, certainly clearer than he has. Because everything he has said does not leave me with that impression. And Mr. Amos has responded. He says, at no point during this conversation have I labelled anyone a dole bludger or anything of the sort. Do not try putting words in my mouth that I have not said to support your case. Hey, that seems like a pretty fair statement. Admittedly, he hasn't outright come and said, you're a dole bludger. But his attitude very clearly points to the fact that he feels that if you're unwilling or unable to move and relocate town to find work, then you need to shut the fuck up. That you don't have a right to say that you're not getting enough on Centerlink. And the fact that you're unwilling to do so somehow indicates your unwillingness to work. I think for most people, they would use the term dole bludger. He may not have used that word specifically, but I think it's pretty clear that's what his attitude is. His attitude is, if you are unwilling to do what it takes to get any job, then you're bludging off the system. Therefore, you're bludging off the dole. Therefore, you are a dole bludger. He can split hairs all he likes, and hey, I'm definitely one for pedantics. I'm definitely one for semantics. I use my words very carefully most of the time. So, good on him. I'm glad he hasn't outright said dole bludger, but certainly the thrust of his conversation and the thrust of his attitude, that's my interpretation. And I think it's a pretty fair one. But if you think that that's wrong, again, feel free to explain it to me. I really would like to know where the distinction is. But anyway, he goes on. Someone who was older would probably be more open to the idea of moving away from work. It was a very common practice in previous generations to move away to secure employment. Again, I ask, why should taxpayers be expected to subsidise someone who refuses to move away from an area where there is no work available to an area where they could obtain employment and contribute to their own lifestyle? Now, I will respond to that. I'll respond to that when I get to the next point. So we'll keep going. A single mother who has left due to an abusive relationship has plenty of avenues available to assist them. I have seen that firsthand. You know what? That's correct. That very statement, though, doesn't address the fact that he is suggesting, and has, before this conversation, in this conversation previous, that he feels that, a single parent should be doing everything they can to get a job. Yet, he hasn't addressed at all the concerns that I brought up. How do you then maintain the welfare of the child? How do you reach work-life balance, especially if you have to relocate? Especially given the fact that he takes suggestions of seasonal work, picking and the like. How do you subject a toddler or even a school-aged child to that? Especially if you're a single parent, you don't have a partner to help shoulder that burden or shoulder those constraints on your time. But anyway, he says, my original statement is not, I'm assuming saying talking, but my original statement is not talking down to anyone. It's a simple statement of fact. I couldn't find work in Winton, so I moved away. I kept moving away from the comfort of my family unit until I found full-time work. If I can do it, why can't anyone else? What makes people you are citing any different? Well, look, this is what I was talking about in the entire last video, and it's what we'll continue to talk about now. What makes them different is they're not Mr. Bill Amos. They are not in the same circumstances as him. Not the least of which because, by his own admission, he undertook moving away for work 20 years ago, plus. Between 20 and 25 years ago, given our age. He's also admitted that he didn't have any dependents when he did so. I would gather he didn't own a house. In fact, I know that for a fact. But anyway, he didn't own a house. He didn't have anything to lose beyond his own welfare. He didn't stand to lose a property that he owned because he had to move away. He didn't have to worry about the welfare of any children or partners. Sure, he could move away. That was 20 years ago. That was 20 years ago. The job environment is completely different today than it was 20 years ago. I know that even from personal experience. For starters, 20 odd years ago, when both Mr. Amos and myself would move and relocate for jobs, there were jobs around that people would do that are now replaced by kiosks, by self-service. Now, of course, that doesn't pertain to every industry, but it is an example of how things have changed in 20 years. Alright? It's the same as the 457s that he likes to talk about, people who come from overseas who work. That was less prevalent 20 years ago than it is now. I know that because I've been in those industries. Bill would know that if he's been in those industries, and he certainly indicates he's been in some of those industries. So what makes those people different to him? Personal circumstance. He's not a woman, so I think it's very clear that, there's some significant differences between his capacity to do things and someone who's a woman, because they're going to have different opportunities afforded to them, particularly 20 years ago. And it's not about prejudice, it's about what an employer would expect. If you have a hard-working girl come in 20 years ago for a high labour position, and you had a healthy young man come in for the same position, you are more likely finding that employer would choose the male. It's not a matter of being prejudiced, it's just confidence. That employer would feel more confident that the man will do the job. Having said that, I know many women who could do jobs better than men any day. But certainly 20 years ago, that was very strong. And look, it goes the other way too. How many retail assistants out there are women as opposed to men? That's not necessarily prejudiced either. Again, it's about expectation. Employers are acutely aware of the fact that, particularly when it comes to clothing stores and the like, women attract clientele. They make the clientele more comfortable. You go to a women's clothes store, they typically have women cashiers and women assistants and that sort of thing. Part of the reason is because women feel more comfortable in change rooms and discussing lingerie and the like with another woman than they do with a man. So yeah, everyone's situation is unique, Bill. It's not yours. If everyone's situation was yours, an exact carbon copy of your situation, everyone would do exactly what you do. Because that's why you do it. Because of your circumstance. The fact that the logic of that escapes you is troubling. But anyway, he goes on to say, I now work away from my home. I only see my home and family 1 week out of 3. By your logic, I should quit my job, sit at home with my family supporting my complaining that Centerlink does not do enough for me and there is no work in the area. Imagine Australia if we all applied your way of thinking. Now, we seem to have gotten to a bit of a bind here. Because on one hand, Bill is saying he's never said, but dole bludger, and he's correct. He's never specifically used the words dole bludger. I have, to some effect, put those words into his mouth because that's the impression and that's the attitude that I get from him. But he hasn't specifically used those words. And in the same way, I have at no point told him that he should quit his job or sit at home, complaining that Centerlink isn't enough for him. At no point have I suggested he does anything beyond being facetious and asking whether he's volunteering to pay for other people to relocate to other areas for better work opportunities. Never asked him to quit his work. But anyway, so we'll move on to my response. Now my response is pretty easy, right? And I say, I never said you should not do not do what you choose to do. Not written the best, but anyway, I think you get the point. I'm not trying to tell him what to do. Your statement was a blanket statement regarding Centerlink payments. You neither specified anyone nor excluded anyone, and that's the fact. The fact is, his very first statement was, here's a novel idea, get a job, or move to where you can get a job. Basically, I'm paraphrasing, I'd have to go back and look specifically, but that's pretty much the crux of it. So he hasn't said, but unless you're injured or you're whatever. He hasn't specified anything, and he hasn't excluded anyone. Therefore, the statement is assumed to apply to everyone who is supported by Centerlink. And I go on. You are correct, previous generations did relocate for work more. They had less population competing for the work available. Child labour was a thing. There was less household debt and more unskilled work available to them. I go on. Your tax, as everyone's tax does, subsidises many things that directly and indirectly affect you. tax pays for roads, even though many don't drive. Does that mean that those people should be offended because Mr. Amos uses the roads, but they can't or don't? Tax also pays for public transport, even though there are a number of people who drive a car and don't use public transport. It subsidises childcare, even though not everyone has a child, or Medicare, even though not everyone is sick. Why? Because people can recognise that not everyone has the same resources, opportunities, or capacities as everyone else. Now, I bring this up specifically because Bill keeps hitting this point. Why should taxpayers pay to assist other people? That's in the crux. That argument is such a fallacy that it would be the same as me saying, well, why should taxpayers pay for roads that he can drive on that some of those taxpayers don't use or can't use? Really, I mean, that's what it comes down to. That's what tax is. Tax isn't something that you pay that comes in a little box that says, this is just for me, only for me. I pay my tax just to benefit myself. It's a much more communal, sociable thing. It's to support those people who need that support, whether it's through Centerlink or the ability to drive a car on a road that isn't complete rubbish. Regardless of whether you need that assistance through Centerlink or you drive a car. Now go on. Should all those who came before Mr. Amos, should they feel offended that they subsidised his schooling because he didn't meet their academic standards? I mean, really? He's having a conversation about how these people on Centerlink, they don't meet his expectations. They don't meet his standards. His standards are, well, suck it up, shut up, or move away, and if you don't, well, you're a dog bludger. I mean, again, I'm using those words. He doesn't use them specifically, but that certainly seems to be his attitude. And that's the thing. So, was he a straight-A student when he left school? Should all those people who worked before him, whose tax in part subsidised schooling in Australia, should they feel offended because he didn't apply himself as rigorously as he could have at school? Should they be offended that their tax subsidises his medical bills or medication, even though, having known Bill, he's drunk alcohol, he smoked, I'm pretty sure he's, eaten fat, eaten sugar, and I imagine he probably doesn't take the 10,000, it's supposed to be 10,000 steps a day. That's the recommended number of daily steps you should take for your own health. I'm guilty of all those things. I've had alcohol, I've smoked, I've consumed fat, I've eaten sugar, and yeah, I've had periods in my life where I've done 10,000 steps a day, but I can't suggest that's the case at the moment. The point is that should those people who paid tax, who worked and paid tax, who contributed to the medical system that's there to look after all Australians when they're sick, should they feel offended that I drank alcohol or smoked or consumed fat or any of those sorts of things? Should they feel offended that he did? Should I feel offended that my back injury, that my back was injured while paying tax, working the only job I could get at the time, because if I hadn't taken that job, Mr. Amos would have considered me a lesser person if I hadn't? I mean, really? Will's argument is, get whatever job you can, do whatever you can. Should I feel offended or upset because my back was injured doing that job? Because it was the only job I could get at the time. It was a high-risk job, and unfortunately, that risk fell on me. Should I blame him because of his attitude? I don't know. I don't have an answer. I'm just asking. I really want to know. Should I feel offended that many people can no longer enjoy long drives on roads due to age or financial austerity, despite the fact that he's still enjoying the roads that their taxes paid for? What about the woman who left an abusive relationship? Should I feel offended because our tax affords her those opportunities that he's even mentioned, even though they're not for me. I'm not a woman who's been abused, and neither is he. Should they feel offended because their taxes are being used to support someone else that isn't of direct benefit to him? Everyone's tax is a mechanism to benefit not just ourselves, but those who need it, need what we don't. If it is not enough for some honest people now, where do we go as more people are entrenched to automation? I mean, that's part of it. If at the moment people are saying, I'm not getting enough money on Centerlink, I'm just getting by, I'm barely getting a by, and I keep applying for work and I'm struggling to get work, I can't get work, I keep applying and I'm unsuccessful. How much more difficult is that going to become the more and more that the workplace, the workforce is being replaced by automation? And in particular, we're talking about low-skilled or unskilled workforce. People who work at takeaway restaurants, at shopping centres, all those sorts of things. Self-serve now, kiosks. That means anyone who hasn't got a college degree or some form of highly skilled education, particularly younger people entering the workforce, are finding less and less jobs available to them because they're being replaced by automation. I go on and say, honestly, given how scared you sound of contributing more to those in need through Centerlink payments, it sounds like he's in hardship. It really does. I mean, if he's so terrified or upset that people are asking for more money from Centerlink, the only thing I can think of is that it's a visceral reaction. He feels that somehow there's not enough. He feels that somehow he's losing out. That he is in such threat of losing his own quality of life or lifestyle that it's a genuine fear for him. As I say, are you travelling so far in the pursuit of work only to labour under the fear that he doesn't have enough? Really, it's the only way I can see it. It really is. I don't get upset because, someone says that I'm not getting enough pension, or I'm not getting enough carers payment, or I'm not getting enough, of a working wage in any particular job. The reason why is because I don't feel that I'm going to lose anything by them saying that. I don't feel like my work is threatened or my lifestyle is threatened. If they feel it's not enough, they should have the right to voice it. I'm not worried that I'm going to go without. The only reason I can think of anyone should feel worried that they're somehow going to lose out or they're going to be adversely impacted by it is because they're living in such a fearful state. Anyway, now unfortunately I see here the next point that I've pulled up hasn't actually expanded in the PDF that I've generated. But if you go to the original posts, you'll see it. But what I did is I basically posted some facts and figures. There were the facts and figures with regards to the current unemployment rate and the current job opportunities. And I'm not going to pull it up right now. I may do it a little bit later, but right now I'm not going to. But basically, it comes to the conclusion that there is 15.57 people, unemployed people, competing for every single job that's available in Australia. If that doesn't make sense to you, basically what that means is if you take all the jobs that are available in Australia, but every single one of those jobs, skilled or unskilled, there is 15 plus people competing for those jobs, each and every single one of them. There is more unemployed people, skilled and unskilled, willing or unwilling to work, than there are jobs within Australia. That means that even if every single person who currently subsists on Centerlink payments had every skill they possibly could achieve through education and had unwavering willingness to do any job that's available, there are not enough jobs for every single person who currently doesn't have one, who is of working age. That means for all of Mr. Amos's rhetoric about moving away and trying, to go to better areas where there's more work in that, ultimately means that even if people are capable of doing that, there is currently always going to be a very high portion of people who simply will not be able to get work because those jobs, there aren't enough of them. Does that immediately exclude them from the right to say, I'm struggling to get by on Centerlink? I don't think so. I honestly don't think so. If you were to say to someone, there is no jobs available, genuinely, statistically, that there's no jobs available, all of the other jobs have been filled, and you have all these other people left, and there's no job available within Australia for them to even apply for, surely they have at least the right to say, well, I'm struggling to get by on the assistance I get. The thing is, you have to understand, being able to express that you're struggling to get by doesn't mean that the situation has to change. It doesn't mean necessarily that it will change. But I think that everyone should at least have the right to express that they are struggling, whether it's on benefits or whether it's I'm simply not earning enough in the wage in the job I'm in. That's how you bring awareness to the situation. That's how, hopefully, culturally, we improve the situation, whether it is for benefits or it is for a wage. If you're currently in a job where you're doing an exceeding number of hours and you're getting paid very, very little to do so, and you are struggling with the cost of living, even with that paid job, you should express that you are struggling to make ends meet in that paid job, because it's only through drawing attention to that that we can recognise culturally that the system needs to change and people need to be paid better, whether it is benefits or it is a wage. Anyway, Bill responds, how is it you think I'm scared or in hardship? Well, I think I've already explained it. He said, I really don't know how you could possibly come to that conclusion given you know nothing of my circumstance. Well, he's right. I know nothing about his circumstance. I deduced that from his attitude. Again, I've done business coaching. I've done personal coaching. I've owned my own businesses. I've been both an employer and an employee. And I can tell you that from my personal experience, the only people who express the sort of things that Bill is saying is because there is an underlying and unresolved fear of loss. That somehow they're going to have less because someone else is asking for more. Or suggesting that they're struggling to get by on what they have. It's either a reminder to them that they are struggling themselves when they hear someone say, I'm struggling to get by. Well, that can make some people go, oh shit, I'm struggling too. Oh, shut up, don't say anything. And try and bury that. Try not to face that. So yeah, maybe he is scared. Maybe he is in hardship. But anyway, he goes on. I work hard for the money that I earn. I emphasise earn. Congratulations, Bill. You make it sound like you're the only one. You make it sound like anyone who's currently on Centerlink benefits has never had a job or earned or worked hard. At least that's how I read that particular sentence. Maybe you're not wording things very well. I don't know. Anyway, he goes on. I'm not relying on others to support my lifestyle. Well, that's good. That's bloody good. Fantastic. Wouldn't want to take that away from you. You, on the other hand, have given me an honest answer as to why someone should not move to gain employment. Just excuses. No shortage of excuses either. I'm unsure if you're working at the moment or not. It doesn't bother me either way. I'll keep supporting my family, and I'm damn happy to do it for them. Well, obviously, Bill and I, we diverge on this point, because he feels that I'm giving excuses. I'm not giving excuses, I'm giving practical examples of things that can be an impediment to people being able to freely move for work. You think that's maybe we have different ideologies of what the word excuse means. Maybe that's what excuse means to him. To me, an excuse is something that you make up to avoid doing something that has no real relevance. But if I said to you, oh dear, I will never be a marathon runner because I'm paralysed from the neck down. Is that an excuse? Or is it just an example of an impediment to me being able to do that? By his argument, it would be an excuse. Must be an excuse, because apparently all the other things I've mentioned, which do impact on a person's ability to move freely for work, is no different than the fact that being paralysed from the neck down impedes upon a person's ability to physically move. I'd like to know what people's opinions of that is. Do you think that they're just excuses? Or do you think that that's what he means by excuses? Do we have a differing of opinion as to what the word excuse means? Beyond that, right, he wants to support his family, he's good and he's happy to do it. Awesome. Don't want to take that away from him. And as I said in the last video, and I'll say it again in this one, this isn't meant as a personal attack. I genuinely want to try and understand why Bill has the attitude that he has, why he has the opinion that he has, why he thinks the way he does. I personally have the impression it's because he's underinformed. That he doesn't have the same experience as other people. That he's so insular in his own personal experience that he can't think outside of his own personal experience. But that's just my gut feeling. That's my impression. And I could be wrong. And I'd like to know if other people feel that that's not correct. But anyway, he goes on. People who won't work will always complain and make excuses as to why they can't. True. They will always complain that they deserve more for nothing. Well, that's probably true too. I don't know if they always suggest they deserve more for nothing, but sure, no. Those people who genuinely don't want to work, they will make excuses not to. Whether they complain or not is a different thing. I think that's a completely different thing. But certainly it will happen with some of them. He goes on, others, like me, will continue to work and our taxes will fund the ones who don't. Along with other social services you pointed out, all paid for by taxpayers and not Centerlink recipients. Now here's the thing, Bill. Here's the thing. It's a pretty reasonable statement. Made all the more confusing by the fact that if you have been on Centerlink in the last 20 years, you'd also know that tax comes out of Centerlink payments. Of course, you get it back if you don't get a job. If you don't earn enough, then that money obviously comes back to you. But you do pay tax when you're on Centerlink payments. It does come out. And that's obviously because the idea is if you do get a job sometime in that fiscal year and you earn enough money to pay tax, that would also be part of your income. So, I'm not suggesting that necessarily reflects on it because it's taxpayers' money paying for tax. But, again, we sort of get back to this point where the way you word things, at least in my impression, is to leave the impression that you feel that everyone who is on Centerlink is not or has not been a taxpayer. And that's clearly not the case. My response again, and this time I've obviously posted it again and it's come up. I've posted those figures again. And they're from the Australian Bureau of Statistics. That's what the Labour Force ABS is. Australian Bureau of Statistics. In 2018 December, the total number of unemployed was 666,700 people. The total number of underemployed. Now, if you don't know what underemployed means, it means people who are in casual or part-time work who do not earn enough to be taken off of Centerlink benefits. They still are subsidised in some way through Centerlink benefits. Those underemployed people, 1,117,500 people. If you want to add those two together, just roughly you're looking at about 1.8 million people who in some way rely upon subsidy by the government. Hidden unemployed, 1,080,000. These are people who participated in job search and mobility. Department of Employment Vacancy Report, 183,900. So, let's sum it all up here. Now remember, this is from the Australian Bureau of Statistics from 2018 December. Just 4 months ago. There are 2,864,200 people competing for, wait for it, 183,900 job vacancies. Now, I get the impression that numbers scare Bill. So, you'll see right under that, they've broken it down. The ratio of job seekers to vacancies, 1 to 15.57. That means there is 15 plus people that are competing for any given job. Bill's response to that is, the company I work for is looking for new recruits at the moment. Can't get enough people. Now here you'll see that I was responding to something previous, but I basically said, because Bill wondered why I would feel that he might feel scared or in hardship. My response to that was, it would be understandable if you felt concerned. You're suggesting that 15 plus times the number of jobs available in people relocate to places where there is work, like where Bill is. Or, if you want to take those numbers above, that potentially he wants 2.8 million people to relocate to where he is to compete for the work that's there. Now, obviously, that's not practical, but this is the point. It's understandable that someone may be scared that happens, because not only that, but you're talking about an influx of people who may be better qualified for his job than Bill is. At this point, I'm pretty confident that if I spoke to Bill's boss, I could get Bill's job. I don't say that because I want to take it away from him. I don't say that because I want to sound nasty. I say that because the impression I've got of how Bill handles stress, statistics, facts and figures, conflict and discussion would not reflect very well if he was applying for a job and I was the employer. And I know this because I've been in these situations. It's one of the things that we do and we teach when we do business coaching with regards to vetting people who will handle certain job positions. But I go on. As I said, he said, the company I work for is looking for new recruits at the moment. Can't get enough people. So I respond, who are they? Post the job vacancies here. Let's pass them on to people who can and want to work. Hey, that sounds like a great idea. There's people who want to work. His boss is looking for new recruits. Can't get enough people. And Bill wants to encourage people to relocate to get a job. And there are no doubt people out there who can relocate. They don't have the same impediments as other people. So what loss can it possibly be for Mr. Amos to post those details publicly online so his boss can have that pool of potential employees? I also respond that if his employer can provide a guarantee of work, finance can be provided for those that need it to relocate. Again, if his boss just can't get enough people and really want them, it seems to me to be a win-win situation. If there's people who want to work and he needs the people and he's willing to give them jobs and he's prepared to give them a guarantee of work, those people can be financed and have the means to relocate to fulfill those positions. Bill then responds, and this is obviously to my earlier point about him being scared. He says, I'm not concerned. My skill level and experience makes me very safe in my work. All that is because I work very hard and gain plenty of training and qualifications. I'm pretty safe. I'm glad he feels that way. He obviously hasn't been in the business sector, and certainly not in the coaching sector. Because if he did, he would know that the business sector and the employment sector is changing rapidly and has been for a while now. This gets back to my last video's points, that there used to be long-term jobs available. Jobs that you could potentially have for your entire adult working life. They don't exist anymore. The expediency with which businesses start and close has increased exponentially, to the point now where there are businesses that start and close within 4 or 5 years. Easily. We all know what happened during the global economic crisis. There were even large businesses that were affected. I myself was working in the engineering and mining sector. I worked for one of the biggest engineering companies in Australia, who actually had so much work they had 24-hour workforce, welding and fabricating. I went away for a long weekend, came back at the conclusion of that long weekend. There were 4 people left. Over that long weekend, because of the global economic crisis, the sudden stoppage of various projects or potential projects, uplined or incoming projects that were put on hold or cancelled altogether, immediately dried up all the work, and everyone was laid off except for 4 people inside the warehouse and about half dozen people in the office, from a workforce that was around 170 people. That didn't have anything to do with skills. It didn't have anything to do with experience. That had to do with a change in circumstance. I'm very glad that Bill feels safe. And, for the life of me, I hope he does have a safe job. I hope that's true. But anyone who thinks that skill alone or experience alone gives you longevity or safety in your job does not understand the working landscape in today's terms. They just don't. They just don't. It is something that is so far beyond their grasp that really you would hope the best for them, that they would get through to retirement age without ever being blindsided by something they're simply not looking for or prepared for. As I respond to that, I say, well, Amos, I hope so. We are all getting older and the figures do not look good. Now you'll see that I've actually put changes in hourly rates of pay. Now if you know anything about hourly rates of pay, it's a reflection on supply and demand in the job market. It doesn't just reflect what people are getting paid, but it can also be a picture of larger forces within the market. I sent that to him. I have no idea whether he read it at all. But his response is, I have plenty of super, I'm on track to retire comfortably at 65. As for posting jobs from my workplace, it's not going to happen. However, I can post 2 jobs from those 2 meat processes I was talking about. But you still want a handout available to relocate, don't you? I think this is a pretty clear indicator that Bill hasn't thought through what he said at all. He's finished saying that his boss is scrambling to find people. He's even said that he wants people to go and relocate to where there's work. And yet as a courtesy to his boss, as a way to help his boss, or even to help other people, he won't post those vacancies in a public forum. I can understand if he doesn't want to give his boss's personal number, of course, but you'd think you'd be able to give the name of the business, a contact for HR, any of those sorts of things. I mean, it's certainly not a loss to Mr. Amos. At most, if he is working somewhere, it would be, maybe 5 minutes to look up the information. You'd certainly know what business you're working for. If you don't, he's in some serious trouble. He goes on and says, well, I can post 2 from meat process. And you'll see underneath he's actually posted 2 from Seek. Well, that's fantastic, Bill. That is fantastic. It's good that you've posted them there. It's a little bit redundant given the fact that I'm pretty sure lots of people, if not everyone, knows that Seek is a place you can go to look for work. And I'm sure that those people would have found those jobs. But that's fine. You had an opportunity to help your boss secure more willing participants in the workforce. But you don't want to. I can tell you, if you were my employee, if you were my employee, and I was your employer, and I had let you know in some form or another that I was looking for people to work, and I wanted people who want to work, or are willing to work, and an opportunity came to you to let them know about it and pass on those details, and you didn't, I'd really want to know why. I'd have to assume that the reason why you'd be unwilling to divulge that information is because you have a fear that you will be replaced or retrenched by possibly more or better, more skilled people or harder working people who will enter that business around you. I can't think of any other reason why you wouldn't feel comfortable to divulge that information, especially if I was looking for people, as you say your boss is. In fact, I would be appreciative if you were my employee and you had found people who were willing to move or go, get this job, and I really was trying to find people, trying to fill those positions, and I was struggling to fill those positions, and they were genuine positions, and they would reflect on the bottom line of my business. They would help my business run more effectively, more efficiently, more profitably. I'd praise you. I'd say thank you very much. That's very good. This is someone who was thinking on their feet, who was thinking of what can benefit the company, what can benefit the business. But your response is, I'm not going to post it. Which, I'll be honest, Bill, as someone who has employed people before, my initial thought to that is, the only possible reason for that is you feel scared that you would be entrenched out of your job by people who potentially could do better at your job than you do. Whether that's true or not, doesn't matter, but that would be my impression. And it would certainly make me look at you with far more scrutiny within my business. Because I would have this underlying sense that you don't have the confidence to perform and excel in that job. But anyway, we'll go on. So you say, okay, these jobs that you put on seat, no experience required, just relocate. And then you say, and this is where I've got to admit, Bill, I'm starting to get amused by this whole thing. This is where you go, or are you scared because you're entrenched in a low economic area and can't see your way out? I can't help but find that funny, to be honest. But that's fine. I mean, that's okay. No. Answer to your question, Bill, no. I'm not scared that I'm entrenched in a low economic area. Can't see my way out. I'm always doing something, Bill. Always doing something. Always doing something. What you may not know about me, Bill, not only have I owned my own business, one of those businesses, I've actually owned more than one business, one of those businesses was product broker. You probably haven't got a clue what a product broker is, but it's something that I continue to do. It doesn't require me to relocate. It's something that I can do online. It's something that I can do when the opportunity is there. When someone requires something and I can be a facilitator for that, then it's something I can do. If that contributes to my fiscal bottom end, great. If it doesn't, great too. But I'm always doing something, Bill. In these last 6 months alone, not only do I volunteer in various places, as I said in the last video, but I've learnt to program, I've written software, I've looked at doing, online monetization. In fact, this is part of what this is, Bill. In fact, any money, any ad revenue that's generated from this video or any of the ones that are related to it will go into a pool of money that will be used, if there's enough, to relocate for jobs if they come up and if I'm successful. And if it's not enough, if I don't get much money out of it, if I don't get enough to relocate or anything like that out of the ad revenue on these videos on YouTube, I'll buy that takeaway cup of coffee that lots of people seem to be upset about. The other thing about being a product broker, Bill, I probably pay, at best guess, probably between a quarter and a third of what you pay for just about anything you buy, aside from food, because I'm not a product broker for food. But electronics, anything else, I buy them wholesale. That's what a product broker is. It's part of a product broker's MO. It's part of what we do. I do that because I also recognise the fact that it's twice as hard to earn the money that it is to save it when you're buying things. If you don't understand that, talk to an accountant. Honestly, if you don't understand that, talk to an accountant. Because you can eat a takeaway dinner, it'll cost you, it could cost you an entire hour's wage on a given dinner. And you could eat it in 10 minutes. 15 minutes, 20 minutes. But you can eat it faster than you can earn it. If you want me to simplify it, you can eat that money faster than you can earn it. You can spend that money faster than you can earn it. So yes, it's more economical to find ways to reduce what you spend, because it's one way of leveraging your time. Regardless of whether you're working or not, it's one way of leveraging your time, it's one way of leveraging your money, and it's something that you can control. And if you're educated enough, or you're skilled enough, or you're experienced enough, and you look into these sorts of things, Bill, you'd understand that. So no, I'm not scared. As I said to you, yes, I'm unemployed at the moment. I've actually been long-term unemployed for a while, because I've looked after my daughter. From the time that my boss went bankrupt, I have applied for work again and again. I haven't been successful. I also haven't been terribly upset by that, because at the same time I've had the opportunity to be there for my daughter as a single parent, to look after her before she went to school. Now that she's at school, I'm much more focused on trying to get work, but again, I still have not been successful in getting work. That's fine. That's a temporary situation. It will change sooner or later. You know what I can do? I can work efficiently and effectively in how I spend my money. And I can tell you that I'm in a better place now with my cost of living and my lifestyle than I have been when I earned $15,000 plus a week. And I know this because I've been at this particular engineering place that I worked at before I was let go from there because of the global economic crisis. That's the amount of money I was earning. $1,500 plus a week in that job at one of the largest engineering mobs in Australia. And you know what? I've got more to show here now in the circumstances I'm in than I did then. It's just a difference in attitude. Back then, I didn't have to worry about a child or a partner. It was just me. I spent a lot of money going out, drinking, partying, going out, buying DVDs up the wazoo. Every episode of X-Files. Anything I could think of. I just didn't seem to have any real plan for my money and just burnt through it. And a big reason why I don't have any savings from that is because, as I said, after that point, I ended up renting two places, one in Gladstone, one in Rockhampton. I was bouncing between the two, constantly looking for work, and I, to be perfectly honest, Bill, a little overconfident. It's just like you, I said, you know what, I'm qualified for so many different things. I've just come from a job where I'm earning $1,500 plus a week. You don't get paid that if you're unskilled, Bill. And I thought to myself, I'll get a job easy. Yeah, global economic crisis. Yeah, I know everyone's, getting entrenched or let go, and work is drying up, and everything's contracting, and everyone's scared to employ. But I'd sort of got to the point where I'd become so overconfident in my abilities for my skills and experience and everything else to get me a job that I completely neglected to look at the circumstances. The circumstances were outside of my control. I got lots of expressions of interest. Yes, yes, yes. Oh, we'd love to employ you. But you'll have to wait 6 months or so, because at the moment everything is on hold. So give us your number, give us your details, and we'll call you back when everything starts picking up again, when BSL starts up again. All these sorts of things. And you know what? In that 6 months, I burnt through all that savings that I had. Thousands of dollars. I'm not saying it was an intelligent thing, but it was born a little bit out of ignorance, arrogance, or overconfidence. But I did. I burnt through that money. And then I realised, holy moly, I've got nothing. And ultimately, the only job I could get that came up just before that money ran out was the meatworks. That's why I ended up at the meatworks. But anyway, that's my little thing. We'll go on. So I say, I have experience in the meatworks, which is what I just talked about. That's where my back was injured. Ask your boss if he will provide a guarantee of work and is willing to take someone on with a previous back injury. If he says yes, give me the area and I will chase rentals. This is the thing that you seem to have entrenched in you, Bill. You seem to think that I'm asking for a handout. I'm not asking for a handout. I'm not expecting you to pay anything. But the thing is, if I have to somehow raise the money to do it, the only way I currently can do that is with a guarantee of work. If your boss is genuinely looking and trying to find people to fill positions that he needs to be filled, a guarantee of work shouldn't be a hard thing. If he's confident in the interview process over the phone, which you suggested is something we could do, and certainly it's something you can do, there's no reason why he can't fill out a guarantee of work. The reason why I ask is whether he's willing to take someone with a previous back injury is because I misunderstood. I thought you were suggesting that you were working in the meatworks. And I can tell you from personal experience that once you have an injury in the meatworks, a lot of those doors will close. The reason being is because, I'm physically better than I was when my back was injured. But again, and this was something I talked about in the last video, employers have to make a decision weighed upon the risks. And a lot of these places will make the risk assessment that you've already been injured. Therefore, you will be more likely to be re-injured. They are opening themselves up to potential litigation if something goes wrong. That's why if they have a choice between someone who has no history of injury, especially back-related or work-related, and they have someone who has no history of that at all, they would prefer to take the person with no history. They would. It's genuinely, it's unfair and it's frustrating. I've found it frustrating, and I have had moments where I felt it was extraordinarily unfair. But as a business coach, as someone who has had these conversations with these businesses, I understand why. I've actually advocated for this type of thinking to protect businesses from bad actors who might want to try and abuse that. Or just from preventable circumstance. It's not fair. But it is reality. So yeah, if your boss really wants someone to work, regardless of whether it's the meatworks or not, but if your boss really wants someone to work, all he needs is to provide a guarantee of work. And anyone who currently doesn't have the fiscal ability to relocate will very quickly find assistance to relocate. If he's also willing to take someone on with a previous back injury, that certainly opens up a lot of doors to a lot of people, myself included. If he's not interested in someone who has a previous back injury, that's understandable. It's annoying, as someone who's trying to get a job, it's annoying, but I have a responsibility to inform my potential employer of what risk they may be undertaking. See, litigation can go both ways, Bill. You can say, well, don't tell them that you've got a back injury. And some people choose to do that. And that's correct. But if something does happen, and that employer is then made aware after the fact that you have deliberately withheld information about previous injury, and it's in some way has affected their bottom line or their reputation, there's nothing preventing them from suing you, from engaging in litigation against you, because you've misled them. You haven't been honest. You haven't been open with them. It is a bit of a strange little balancing game you got to do. You have to, as a potential employee, you have to weigh up the risks that you face in either telling them or not telling them. Because obviously if you tell them, you may not get the job. But if you don't tell them, you could risk even more. And it's the same for the employer. They have to weigh out the risks. The risks are that you may not be physically capable of the job, even though you may appear it, and you may feel confident that you are. So we'll go on. So I go on, and I say, keep in mind that by your own account, 15 plus people per job should shut up and cop it sweet with their just getting by Centerlink payments. That's potentially 3,781,953 people trying to get your job. Now, I must stand corrected here. I didn't calculate those numbers correctly. I did that by calculating the number of jobs by 15 plus times, and somewhere along the lines I didn't do it correctly. Right? But anyway, the figures are up above. Whatever it was, 3.8. What? Where was it? 2.8 million people are potentially competing for your job. Because I guarantee you, if there's someone who wants a job and they are astute enough to know how to do things, you don't just have to apply for jobs that are available. You can go into a place that already has all their positions filled and go in and say, I think I'm a better employer than what you've got, a better employee than what you've got. It's not a very nice thing to do, but you can certainly do it. You can go in and say, look, these are all my qualifications. If you have anyone here that you think I can do their job better, I'm available. So yeah, I would understand if you felt concerned or or scared. If I knew that I had 2.8 million people competing for my job, even though I already have it, I'd be remiss not to at least keep that in mind and do everything I can to make sure that my job isn't impinged upon by someone who is hungrier than I am, by someone who is more willing than I am, by someone who is more skilled than I am. And it's not to be, sort of alarmist or anything, but that's something you have to consider. Especially if you're asking these people to relocate to where you are, where the work is, because you already have said your boss is looking for workers. You've already suggested that the work is where you are. And you want all those people who can't get a job where they are to relocate. So by your logic, all of those people could potentially move to where you are to try and crowd out your job. Not necessarily intentionally, but just to be there, to be a larger pool of resource that your employer can then look and say, you know what, this guy really isn't doing enough for me, for my bottom line. I think there's hungrier people out there. I think there's more compatible people out there. I think there's more astute people, more socially adept people. People who will leave me with a better PR. Whatever. But anyway, I go on to say, it's not about handouts, it's about facts and figures. It is simple facts and figures. I've given you the facts and figures. These aren't facts and figures I've pulled up off the top of my head, Bill. I've given you links to them. This is from the Australian Bureau of Statistics. I'd understand if I just randomly threw numbers at you and you're like, oh, he's just talking out of his arse. But I've given you statistics, Bill. Numbers don't lie. If you believe numbers lie, then you failed at school. If you believe numbers lie, Bill, then all those taxpayers who paid in part for your schooling really should be offended. Because numbers don't lie. If you have X amount available and you have 15 times more than that, there's not enough. 15 times more demand than what is available. It's not enough. It doesn't matter how much you want to beat your chest, proclaim how good you are, suggest how no one else can do it better than you, or that you know how to do it, or you know a better way. Unless you can provide a practical example of how to overcome those sort of impediments for other people who are not in the same circumstance as you, unless you can provide pragmatic and practical examples of how to give that opportunity to all those people to have a job out of a pool that is so small, and you're talking out your ass, Bill. You're talking out your ass so hard that at this point, whether you realise it or not, in this conversation, I'm just amused by it all. I genuinely am. I don't want to be. I don't want to sound like I'm belittling you, and I don't want to, and as I said, this is not intended as a personal attack. I genuinely want to try and understand. But your complete blind attachment to this entrenched thinking, even though the hard numbers are in front of you, completely escapes me. Now after that I say, oh cool, Bordertown, SA, cool. You know why? Because I looked at those jobs. I applied for those jobs. Your response was, surprise, surprise, excuses. You wouldn't even bother to apply, would you? Holy shit, Bill, how do you think I knew it was Bordertown, South Australia? Because I looked them up. I'm registered with Seek. Didn't take me much to pull that up and forward my resume. You go on. Just out of curiosity, if you were injured at work, are you not covered by work cover insurance? Now that's a good point. That's actually a genuinely good point. You said, I don't work for the Meatworks. I said I wouldn't post my employer's details. One, because I don't want anyone on Facebook to know who I work for. And secondly, because my employer has a strict social media policy that doesn't allow me to name them. Well, holy shit, Bill. What the hell does your employer do? What does your employer do? Because it sounds shady as fuck to me, I can tell you. Because you're saying that you're... really, your employer must have a very high risk aversion with regards to public relations. So I can't really imagine what your job is. I really can't. But you know what? You didn't have to, okay, so you didn't have to mention your job. But if you're aware of the fact that there are listings available, that your boss is looking for work, or workers I should say, then he must be listing the work placements somewhere. He must be listing the job placement somewhere. He must have something, or her, sorry, it could be a woman, but they must be looking for workers somehow. They must be advertising it in some way, or getting the word out. Surely they're not just standing behind the door in the office going, I wonder when anyone's going to come through the door for the job. And if that's the case, Bill, then you would have to know what mechanism that is. You'd have to know where to direct people. You'd have to. You clearly know what's going on. I mean, if you're privy to the fact that your employer has a strict social media policy and doesn't allow you to name them, then you obviously must be in the know enough to know exactly where to direct people, whether it's to the HR department, or it's to this particular advertisement in this particular newspaper, or through Seek, or through Job Search, or through a job network provider, or through a temping agency, through a recruitment agency. It's an excuse, Bill. By your definition, it's an excuse. You're making excuses. You're making excuses. You're saying you wouldn't post your employees' details because you don't want anyone to know who you work for. Why, Bill? Is your work lack glamour? Do you feel embarrassed to work for who you work for? Is it that your employer has a reputation that you would be embarrassed to be associated with? Is it that your employer engages in some industry that you're not comfortable with? I mean, that would be a reasonable assumption given the fact that your employer has a strict social media policy. It's understandable. I've worked with lots of businesses that do have a strict social media policy, but they still have portals to advertise employment opportunities. Whether it's through their own website, recruitment agencies, job network providers, or other media. So you don't have to provide your boss's phone number. In the bigger scheme of things, you don't even really have to provide your details of who you work for. But there's no reason why you shouldn't know or be able to divulge what that portal is, where to find that information. And to be perfectly honest, Bill, the way you've written that makes the prospect of working for your boss sound rather unattractive. Because you sound embarrassed to even associate yourself with your employer. Which would be concerning to me. If you were my employee, I'd be like, oh, why does this guy not want to mention who he works for? Is it because you don't want other people to know that you're working for them because you're trying to get jobs out of competitors? Or you're trying to do things for their competitors? Or is it you genuinely feel uncomfortable with the association? What is it? If you know what it is, explain it to me. If someone else knows what that possibly is, explain it to me. But that still doesn't explain why you've used that excuse, or those excuses, and certainly by your definition they're excuses, and not just provided, hey, well, look, they don't want me to mention who they are online, they don't like me posting it here, but if you want to get the details, this would be the portal to go through. Look up Seek, look up here. You could just say, look in South Australia, in Bordertown, if that's where you are. You know? If they're not the two jobs that you've submitted through Seek further up, then how is your boss, how is your employer advertising that work? How are they looking for employees? How are they doing it, Bill? Are they sitting behind their desk in their office with their hands held towards the ceiling, face towards the sky, imploring God, God, oh God, please, I need employees. I need employees. Let them walk through the door. Let them come to us. I don't think that's the case, Bill, and I'm obviously having some fun with this at this point because I'm completely bemused by it all. But I mean, they're either looking for employees or they're not. If they are looking for employees, Bill, there's a portal that they are in some way advertising that they are looking for employees. Media, recruitment agencies, whatever it may be, but they're advertising it and you could have directed us to them. Or is it, in fact, that your employer isn't looking for employees? That's why you don't want to divulge that information. Is that why they don't have a portal where they're advertising that work? Is it that deep down you know, Bill, that where you work, they're not really looking for people? You just want to use that as an excuse, as a way to bolster your argument. Is that what it is? Because I can't, honestly, I read that and they're really the only two things I can think of. Is that you're either scared that you'll become crowded out of your job by better skilled people applying it where you work, or that deep down you feel that there isn't any work and you just do not want to open yourself up to criticism. That you're just talking out your ass. But you go on, you say, given what you have said, I'm guessing you're not working at the moment. Are you on some kind of Centerlink payments? Or Centerlink payments of some kind? Yes, I am. Which I think I've already mentioned, but we'll probably get into that a bit more. I'll go on. I responded, I'm not scared, just experienced. I have owned my own businesses. Worked 21 days on, 7 days off. In town, out of town, blue collar, white collar. I've made 15,000 plus per week. I've been a consultant, R5, plant operator, manager, picker, and almost everything in between. And I have. I've been a builder's offsider. I've had tickets for 6 different plant vehicles. I've worked administration. I've worked coaching. I've worked consultancy. I've been a manager. I've been a boss. I've been a shit kicker on the side of the road. I've done slashing on the side of the road. I've mowed lawns. I've worked in pubs. I've worked 21 days on, 7 days off out of town in Ralston as a surveyor. I've worked as a delivery boy, a painter, a caretaker for a theatre, sound engineer. I've even been a musician, Bill, a paid professional musician. I've been a paid sound engineer, live reinforcement, backfold, load-ins, load-outs. So yeah, it's not a matter of being scared, Bill. It's a matter of being experienced. I've been on both sides of the fences, blue collar, white collar. I've been on both sides of the fences. Employer, employee. Business owner, and someone who doesn't own a business. I've been on both sides of the fences, employed and unemployed, in the last 20 years, which I gotta say is more than your experience, because from what you said, you haven't been unemployed in 20 odd years, and congratulations to you. But I do think that diminishes your understanding of the situation, because you don't have any recent experience with that. You don't have any recent experience with business coaching, so you don't understand the complexities that employers and businesses face. I think that's pretty clear. Anyway, I'll go on. Part of the reason for this experience, why I'm not scared, I'm just experienced, is because I've also had employers go bankrupt. Mining and engineering cease, industries contract, and physical injuries. Some of that I've already mentioned. My last boss went bankrupt. I had a job one day, I didn't have it the next. Was brought on because of a fire, but it was a surprise. We knew we were very, very close, but we didn't think it was going to fall over. We thought we were still on top of things, but it just got to the point where there was not enough liquidity to draw in stock to supply because the assets were frozen while the insurance was going on for the fire. As I said, worked for one of the largest engineering. I've worked for more than one, but in particular, I've worked for one of the largest engineering mobs in Australia, who work directly with oil smelters and other mining industries, Rio Tinto and the like. Global economic crisis. Projects were put on hold. Other projects were cancelled. The industry contracted for at least 12 months and didn't really ramp up for a few years. I've had physical injuries. Some smaller than others. I've been dragged off site and nearly taken to hospital because of heat stroke so bad I thought I was having a heart attack. And actually had an adverse reaction to any type of heat afterwards for about 6 years. I've had a frayed tendon in my elbow. Bit of various cuts and bruises. That's nothing major. But of course, I've had a back injury that physically prevented me from standing up for about 6 months and prevented me from standing up longer than a couple of minutes for about 3 years. With regards to that, that was at the meatworks. And as I go on in this statement, the company I worked for refused all communication either with Centerlink or work cover. They claimed it was not a work-related injury. I didn't write that out, but work-related injury. Now, if you know anything about the reputation for the meatworks, it's not really a surprise. I was warned that when I started. But as you said, take whatever job you can get. That's what I did. And at the time, I was very physically fit. Even though the injury happened at work, work didn't want to take responsibility for it. And I understand that. They're concerned about litigation. They don't, it's something they have to address. And so they tried to find any reason to suggest that it wasn't work-related. In the meantime, every time Centerlink tried to contact them to verify that I was no longer working for them, they refused to answer. And so for a period of about 4 or 5 months, I didn't even get paid my Centerlink bill. Because Centerlink could not confirm that I was no longer working. I didn't get a separation certificate from them. Do you think they were going to give me a separation certificate bill? I had to get lawyers involved. This was in Rockhampton, by the way. Right? And keep in mind, at this point, I'm homeless living out of my car. With a fucked back. With photophobia and migraines. With medication that even on Medicare was so expensive I couldn't afford it. In fact, I go on to say, in the 9 months that I spent in my car, I lived off the savings that I had because Centerlink could not confirm I was not working from my employer, and the lawyers got involved. Now, I lived in my car for 9 months. Centerlink couldn't confirm whether I was working or not from my employer for about 4 to 5 months. I can't remember. It's all a bit of a blur because I was in constant pain. But it wasn't the whole 9 months. It was about 4 or 5 months, and then I did start getting paid for them. But even then, what they paid me was so little that I had to make the decision, do I relinquish the car that I had a car loan for and was the only place I could live in and live on the streets with a fucked back, or do I keep the car and get rid of everything else? So I rented a storage shed, Storage King in Rockhampton, or whatever it was, $20 or $40 a fortnight, I can't remember. And I put whatever I could into there. I stopped paying rent because I didn't have a lease. And I lived in my car. I couldn't even afford the hostel that was offered to me because they require money. I got forced into the hostel for a period because Centerlink basically said, well, they'll take the money straight out of my Centerlink before I even got paid. You have no idea how difficult that is, Bill. I know that because if you did, you wouldn't have such arrogant sort of replies as you do. To have next to no money and then have that money taken out, away from you, to put you, admittedly, to a hostel. It was a nice place and I've got nothing against it. But there is a limit to how long you can stay there, Bill. Did you know that? There is a limit to how long you can stay in a hostel before you can no longer stay there because it's temporary accommodation. During that time, I became suicidal. I even went to the hospital in the middle of the night to talk to mental health because I thought I was going to kill myself because I was fantasizing about trying to get the knives in the kitchen of the hostel and cutting my throat. So I got turned away from the hospital. No, I got turned away from the hospital. That's a whole different story, but I got turned away from the hospital. I guess I didn't make much sense. But nonetheless, we got through it. I lived in my car. I sat in 40-degree heat in my car with a fucked back and lived off, it was about $36, $38 a fortnight in food, Bill. So that I wouldn't lose my car. So I still had a place to live and I had a means of transport because I couldn't even fucking walk, Bill. Now, it got to the point after 9 months, because the lawyers, I mean, if you don't know, but, it's not a quick process. It's not like lawyers go knock on the door and things are solved in a week, mate. They take months. It takes time. It got to the point where I simply could not deal with being in constant pain in the middle of 40-odd degree heat in Rockhampton in a car. And thankfully, in the 9 months that I was there, I managed to save just enough to drive from Rockhampton to Winton, where my father lives. The one place I knew which was a safe haven. The one place I knew I could go, and even if I couldn't physically do anything, Dad would just say, it's fine, stay there. So you know what? All that stuff that the lawyers were involved in, I don't know what happened to it. It was hard enough trying to deal with that because I didn't have a fixed address. They struggled to contact me, Bill. The only means of contact they had was my mobile phone number, which meant I had to keep my mobile phone charged. Which meant with a fucked back, Bill. I had to drive with a fucked back to a service station, the only service station in Rockhampton that had publicly available showers, to take a shower, to get changed, to charge my phone. This is while I have a fucked back, Bill, just so the lawyers could contact me. Even Centerlink struggled because I didn't have a fixed address. They sent me to the financial officer, Bill, to try and work out my finances. They went through my expenses, they went through what I earned, and you know what they said? Yeah, no, you're fucked, dude. You're doing everything you can do, that's all you can do. They had no way to improve that situation. They couldn't cancel any more contracts, they couldn't find money from anywhere else. I was doing everything I could. I even went to the Salvation Army financial advice officer. They did the same thing. I laid it out to them. I'm paying whatever it was, $20, $30, $40 or whatever it was for the storage shed. This is what I'm paying for this fortnight. This is my phone. I need my phone because of the lawyers and Centerlink. I need my car. They looked at that and went, yeah, you're stuck. That's what you've got. You're stuck. They even said to me, Bill, that even if I got housing commission, or a commission house, if you like, I wouldn't have been able to manage it because it's a quarter of what you earn. And my expense was more than that, what would have been left over. So I lived in my car for 9 months. As I said, it got to the point where I couldn't take it anymore, and I moved to Winton. It took me 9 months to save the money to travel from Rockhampton to Winton. 997 kilometres, Bill. Do you think I don't have the right to say that I struggled on Centerlink payments at the time? I go on to say, they're not excuses, Bill. As stated before, I would need a guarantee of work before being assisted to relocate. Unless you are volunteering to fund that move, that is all I would have. If it took me 9 months, Bill, to save the money to travel from Rockhampton to Winton, 9 months to save the fuel money, how long do you think it would take for me to save money to travel to South Australia? Now, my circumstances are improved now. It wouldn't actually take me that long as such. I'm in much better circumstances as I was there. But I'm just saying, Bill, you keep having these conversations as if everyone is in your situation or they have identical experience to what you do. And they don't, Bill. Because the one thing I'm fucking sure of, I know this for a fucking fact, you have never been in the situation I've been in. You've never been homeless in your car with a fucked back. with an employer who refuses to confirm with Centerlink that you're no longer working, so that you're not getting money from Centerlink. You're not earning a wage. You're in constant pain with migraines and photophobia to the point where you can't even open your eyes for more than a few seconds. So yeah, that's why people are different to your experience, Bill. I went to the trouble of even looking up how much it cost to travel from here to South Australia, to give you an example. As I said, they're not excuses. As stated before, I would need a guarantee of work before being assisted to relocate, unless you're volunteering to fund the move. That's all I would have. You are talking about $975 for a single ticket for a single person to travel to South Australia from here. I know that because I looked it up at that very moment. What about my daughter, Bill? She's 7. She goes to school. She's in grade 2. Will you be putting me and her up at your place while we're there? Because clearly, you're not going to be able to get from here to South Australia and then turn around and come straight back. It just doesn't work like that, Bill. So we'd have to stay there at least one night, which is a motel, which if you haven't worked out, Bill, costs money. It has to come from somewhere. So if I'm to bring my daughter with me so that she's safe and she's secure, I'd have to take her out of school if it's a work day, obviously, or a school day, She'd have to come with me. That's an added cost to that ticket. Then there's accommodation while we're down there. This is just to go for an interview. But if I have a job, obviously I have to take her with me permanently. That's fine. But again, that's a ticket for her. Where do we stay in the meantime? Because a guarantee of work only gives you assistance to relocate. There are some cravats, which means they're not going to give you bond money and advance rental, especially if the place is too expensive to rent, according to Centerlink. And that's fine, that's understandable. Again, that's what you would expect. Now, obviously, I'm being facetious in asking, would you put us up, or would we need bond and rent too? Because I know you're not offering to pay. I know you're not offering to put us up. Quite frankly, I wouldn't want to stay in the same place as you with the sort of attitude you have. And I certainly wouldn't want my daughter anywhere fucking near you, right? Because your attitude, I really hope my daughter would never have the same attitude as you. But, I'm asking that to be facetious, to try and highlight to you how ridiculous your postulating is. And then I say, and I think this is a pretty fair thing, you're working. I wonder if you could even raise that sort of money in 2 weeks' work. Could you? Along with all your other expenses, along with your rent or your rates or whatever you may pay, and your car and your fuel and support for your partner, your wife, your son. Could you raise that sort of money in 2 weeks? If you can, great, fantastic. I'm just curious whether you could. Because if you can, you have an open offer. Raise that money and fly here. Come and see me. And I'm not being threatening. I'm not trying to threaten you. But if you really can do that, then the offer's here. Come here, have the conversation with me face to face. Let's sit down. Let's talk about it. Because I want to understand. I mean, okay, so you'd have to take time off work. But the offer's there. Would be nice. I haven't seen you for ages. But, I don't think you're going to do it. And if we do it, just so you know, if you do come here to come and visit and sit down and have a conversation, I do hope you know that we will film it. We'll put it on film. We'll get the camera out. We'll stream it. Because I want you to know that it's not going to be a place of vilification or or aggravation or fighting. There's no threats, there's nothing like that. So we can sit down and have a conversation have it live streamed. So there's a record of it. So we can try to understand why you think the way you do. And maybe you can try to understand why I think the way I do. So the offer's there. But I go on, right? I go on because I thought, well, here's the thing. Let me get some more facts and figures for you, Bill. So then I pull up these facts and figures. Living costs in Australia for one person currently. Now, I didn't put the link in. I should have, but anyway, it is there. You can have a look it up. Just look up living costs in Australia. Current living cost in Australia for one person is $2,835 per month. And yes, on Newstart, currently on $277 per week total. That's what it works out to be, Bill. So as I say, please explain to me how to relocate without a guarantee of work, given I pay rent, school fees, power, rego, fuel, and food for my daughter. Remember, we're talking $975 for a single person, one way. Add to that the cost of moving my daughter, school fees, bond, advanced rent. Where does that money come from, Bill? I tell you what, Bill, I'm a fucking legend. I have done some amazing things in my life. As I said, I'm a product broker. I know how to maximize the effectiveness of the money that I spend. I've earned in excess of $1,500 a week. And yet with all that experience and with all that knowledge, I don't see a way to do it. Obviously you do. So you explain to me, do it in a point-by-point fashion. Draw it out. Make a map. Do a pros and cons. I don't care what you do. You can draw a mind map if you like. But I want you to demonstrate to me. Since you obviously know how, you say that it can be done, which indicates that you have knowledge that it can be done. So you obviously have a means, a capacity to explain how it can be done. So do it, Bill. Get a piece of paper, photocopy it if you don't know how to use a computer. Write it in big letters on a whiteboard. Take a photo of it. I don't care how you do it. But since you're expressing that it can be done, this is your words, it can be done, anything can be done. You've done it. You've said it yourself. You've done it. You've done this thing. You've done it. Congratulations. You're an authority on it. Prove it. Demonstrate it. Write it out. Do a bullet point. Do a mind map. If you don't know what a mind map is, I'll teach you. Because again, this is something that I've taught, mind mapping. Look it up, Bill. It's very intelligent. Write it out. Bullet point it. How does someone on $277 per week, given that the average living cost for a single person in Australia is $2,835 per month, how does someone on $277 per week raise $975 for a single ticket, one way, to South Australia, plus a ticket for their child, plus bond, plus advanced rent? How do they do it, Bill? I'm not going to say it can't be done. The reason being is because you seem so confident that it can be done. You say it can be done. You say you've done it. So I'm deferring to you. Show me how. You're the authority, Bill. The ball is in your court. Draw it up. Write it out. Make a box. I don't care if you draw diagrams. Make it into a cartoon. Do whatever you want to do, but make sure it's logical and explainable. If you can do that, Bill, I will be the first person to fire up a YouTube video and say, holy shit, this guy is a bloody genius. He knows what he's talking about. I will, I promise you. I promise you. If you can demonstrate logically and clearly in explainable terms how a person is to do that without your assistance without a handout, without a guarantee of work, then I will sing your praises in any avenue you want. I will. I'll make a video dedicated to you. It'll almost be like in memoriam. Did you get the superstars that'll die? I'll have your photo up there with Bill Amos, legend, genius. And I know I sound sarcastic, and I know that at this point I'm a little bit amused by the whole thing, but I'm actually genuinely serious. If you can explain this stuff in a logical, easily digestible way, diagram, whatever, but if you can do it, and it's replicatable, then I will. I will make a video, I'll have your photo up there, I will sing your praises, I will spend the same amount of time as I make doing these videos, which at the moment is probably about 5 hours. Let me just quickly check. Hey, it is. Look, I did 3 hours and something yesterday, and we're nearly 2 hours now. I will spend the same amount of time singing your praises. I will even get down on my knees, on video, and say, holy shit, I was wrong. This guy knows better than me. This guy's taken the facts and figures. He has a way of thinking about it laterally. He's worked it out. He knows how this can be applied in a pragmatic, demonstrable way. And I was wrong for even questioning that it could be done. I was wrong for even suggesting that $277 per week is a struggle to be on and meet those expectations. To prove that that is what you actually get on Newstart, because, as I said, by your own admission, you haven't done it for 20 years, you'll see I sent the link. humanservices.gov.au. Newstart allowance. How much can you get? It tells you how much you get as a single person. It tells you how much as you get as a partnered parent or a single parent. Now, to explain, the reason I get that at the moment is because there's some confusion with Centerlink about my circumstance. My daughter is with me 50% of the time. But with Centerlink at the moment, because my wife or ex-wife or however you want to phrase that, because she doesn't want to cooperate with Centerlink, they can't confirm that. And so they're still continuing to treat me as a single person on Newstart. That's why I get that much. But if you look, even as a partner, or even as a single parent or whatever it is, I think the next one up, it's about another $60 a fortnight, Bill, an extra $30 a week. So instead of $277, it's about $300. So I think that's pretty easy to show you. That's what it is. It's written there. It's there. It's on the actual Human Services government website. Here you go again, proving, to me anyway, that you're simply not reading what I'm writing. Because your response is, why am I or anyone else expected to give you a handout? You're so fixated on this bill. I understand I've obviously confused you. You don't understand sarcasm or being facetious in any way. Because I'm not asking you for a handout. I'm not asking if you're volunteering because I genuinely expect that you are. I'm trying to prove to you the lunacy of what you're asking. That you're expecting someone to have money to do something that you're expecting of them, but they don't have the means to do it. And unless you are volunteering your own money to do so, then I want to know how you expect them to do it. You go on and say, it's not up to me to talk to my boss, as you've asked me to do. Apply for the job there or anywhere else for that matter, and do it yourself. You want it, then make it happen. You won't though. You'll hide behind every excuse you've given. It's almost rehearsed. Holy shit, Bill, guess what? I'm going to tell you something right now. You know why these videos are live streamed? I'm not rehearsing them. If I was rehearsing them, I'd have a script. I wouldn't talk for as long as I would for a start. It's a fucking long video. And second, I probably wouldn't keep getting certain words wrong, like employer and employee. It's not rehearsed, Bill. It's experience, it's facts and figures. I'm talking to you, trying to have a conversation. If you want to talk about rehearsed, you keep talking about expect to give a handout, expect to give a handout, expect to give a handout, expect to give a handout. If you said it anymore, Bill, you could turn it into a rap song. It'd be like, who let the dogs out? Woof, woof, woof. Expect a handout. Woof, woof, woof. Expect a handout. Woof, woof, woof. That's how repetitive your responses have become. I ask you to explain systematically, digestibly, demonstratively how someone can do what you're asking them to do, and your response seems to be, repetitively, why should I give a handout? I don't know about you, Bill, but that to me, that almost sounds like rehearsal. That sounds like you don't really have a response. That you don't have a genuine thing to contribute to the conversation. And you're falling back on a rote response. Something you've rehearsed in your head again and again and again. Because you're either unwilling or unable to think outside of that simple phrase. You say, it's not up to me to talk to my boss, as I've asked you to do. True. It's not up to you to do it, but by your own admission, your boss is looking for people. By my admission, I'm looking for work. You're telling me that I should be willing to relocate to get work. You've provided me with an opportunity for a job. I've asked you to talk to your boss about it. You respond as if that's foreign or somehow disrespectful. You've never heard of getting jobs through nepotism? Through word of mouth? Really? Are you honestly going to say that, Bill? Are you going to suggest that this isn't a practical way for someone to try and get a job? They've been told by someone that they know, hey, my boss is looking for people. And you think it's a foreign response? You think it's an unreasonable response for someone to say, really? Awesome. Hey, let your boss know I'm looking for a job. I'll give you my number. I'll give you my resume. Get me in contact with them. Again, this makes me believe that you're fabricating this. You're fabricating the fact that your employer is looking for workers. It's the only thing I can think of. It's the only thing that makes sense to me. Again, if anyone can explain it, explain how that's not the case, that's fine, please do, but, you don't want to offer your boss the possibility of an employee that they're looking for. You don't want to offer the opportunity to someone that you want to relocate and find work because you seem offended by the fact that they're unemployed, that you're not going to give them that opportunity? What do you lose by it, Will? It's not going to cost you any money to talk to your boss. I mean, if it does, holy shit, dude, you need to go and talk to fair work practices or something, because if your boss is charging you to talk to him, that's not a fair working environment. But I would suggest that it won't cost you anything to talk to your boss. Just say to your boss, hey, someone's contacted me, they know that you're looking for workers, they want to work. This is why I'm so confident, Bill, that if you give me your boss's phone number or contact details or email or whatever, I reckon I could bet your job that I'd get your job. That's how confident I am. Because I take a look at what you've written, and as someone who has employed people before, it makes no sense to me. It makes no sense to me at all, unless it's one of two things. You are scared that you're going to be crowded out of the job you have because you lack the confidence to feel secure in that job in light of other people competing for it. Other workers around you who may be able to do that job better, more effectively, more efficiently, with more skills. Or you're lying. You're fabricating the fact that your boss is looking for employees because you can't stand the idea of having nothing to back up your argument. And that's not a good place to be as an employee for an employer. Because it also means you will have a propensity to fabricate stuff that you're responsible for if it goes wrong. It means you will have a propensity to fabricate stuff and blame other people or circumstances for things that were inside your control. And as I say later in this conversation, if I read this stuff online and you were a prospective employee of mine, it would not reflect very well. I would look at it and go, this is a person who can't deal with conflict in a pragmatic or practical way. This is someone who has a propensity to fabricate, to obfuscate, to misdirect, to not take responsibility. In fact, I go on after this. I say, you sound defensive. I'm not asking for a handout. In fact, how many times have I said this now, Bill? This is why I know you're not reading what I'm saying. Well, you certainly, English doesn't seem to be your first language. Because it's written there. I'm not asking for a handout. That's not the first time I've written it down here. And yet you keep hitting those same repetitive points. Which no doubt I'm hitting repetitive points right now because, quite frankly, it baffles me. But anyway, I'll keep talking. I say, you clearly believe that you have the answers, so I'm deferring to your judgment. Explain to me how to relocate without a guarantee of work, given I pay rent, school fees, power, rego, fuel, food for my daughter on $277 per week. That's what I just said. Conversation I've just had. You're insistent that it can be done. That's what your words are. You've done it, Bill. That's what you said. You've done it. It can be done. I don't see a way to do it, but maybe you know something I don't, and I'm listening. You know why, Bill? Because in my experience, both as a coach, as a business owner, and as an employee, I have come to recognize that I don't have all the answers. I have a wealth of knowledge. I have a wealth of experience. But the minute you think you know everything is the minute you stop learning. And I'm always open to learning, Bill. So if you genuinely know a way that I don't of how to make that work, please tell me. Again, draw it out, do whatever you want. But tell me, I want to know. Because if you tell me that's knowledge I can take, that's knowledge I can use, and that's knowledge I can pass on to other people that will find value in that information. And I don't want to take that away from you, Bill. If you genuinely know that, I will sing your praises. I will tell everyone I learnt this from Bill Amos. I was stuck. I thought about this. I've worked it out, and I couldn't think of any way to do it practically in all the circumstances that are available to a given individual. But this person did, and I want to teach you how to do it, but I don't want to take away the respect that Bill Amos deserves for working it out. And I'll sing your praises for it. That's one of the things you do when you do public speaking, when you do seminars, when you do business coaching, when you do these sorts of things. You cite your sources. You cite your references. You give praise to the people who have passed on knowledgeable information to you that you're passing on to someone else, onto a business, onto a workforce. So I'm not going to take that away from you. I have no interest in taking that praise away from you if you genuinely know the answer. But I do want to know what the answer is, Bill. Otherwise, it's empty words. Otherwise, what you're telling me has the same validity, the same trustworthiness as someone who's the head of a multi-level marketing scheme that hasn't got off the ground yet, or a pyramid scheme, or a Ponzi scheme. It has the same weight, the same trustworthiness as the, obligatory Arabian prince who has money in a bank, please send us a check. Because unless you can demonstrate, unless you can show what you're talking about, Bill, it's words. I can show you what I'm talking about. I'm giving you examples. I'm giving you links to Australian websites by Australian governmental agencies that give you hard facts and figures. I'm giving you examples, real life examples of circumstances that people face on a day-to-day basis as someone who is reliant upon Centerlink payments, who is actively looking for work, who is finding the obstacles and the impediments to getting that work and to being able to relocate to find that work. I'm giving you those resources. I'm giving you those examples. I'm backing up my words. For the sake of your own reputation, Bill, back up your words. Cite your sources. Prove it. Demonstrate it. Show it. You clearly think you're smarter than I am. You clearly think you're smarter than a lot of other people. I don't want to misjudge you and assume that you're not. So please, prove me wrong. Show me that you're smarter than me. Show me that you can demonstrate clearly, easily, digestibly, demonstratively, repeatably how to do it. Don't just talk about it, Bill. Don't just talk about it. As I say later on, talking about it is as empty as praying for it. You might as well say pray for a job. Pray for a job. Pray for a job. Pray to God for a job. Pray to God for a job. Because unless you can demonstrate a practical way of achieving what you are asking other people to do, that's how empty your words are, Bill. But let's go on, because otherwise we're going to talk all day. And we both know I can talk all day. And if you haven't worked that out, listen to the last video. And I go on. You sound defensive. I'm not asking for a handout. You clearly believe you have the answer, so I'm deferring to judgment. Explain to me how to relocate without a guarantee of work, given I pay rent, school fees, power, rego, fuel, food for my daughter on $277 per week. You insist it can be done. I don't see a way to do it. Maybe you know something I don't, so I'm listening. How to relocate without a guarantee of work on $277 per week. If you don't have an answer, then clearly your words are hollow. Exactly what I just said, Bill. Hollow. If you can't demonstrate it, if you cannot demonstratively prove a way to do what you're saying, then your words are hollow. I go on. Honestly, Bill, I'm starting to believe that you don't really believe what you're saying. Otherwise, you'd have no trouble giving practical advice to someone who is asking for it when you say it can be done. It's just what I said, Bill. You clearly believe, at least the tone of your messages, that you're smarter than me. There's lots of people smarter than me. You might even be one of those people. I have my doubts, but you may be one of those people, and I'm certainly open to the possibility. So demonstrate to me that you're smarter than me. Demonstrate that you can prove with a practical, pragmatic, demonstratable, repeatable example how to do what you're asking and prove to me that you're smarter than I am. Because if you are, fantastic. I learnt something. If you can't though, Bill, your words are hollow. Hollow and meaningless. And I honestly do believe, at this point in the conversation, that you don't really believe what you're saying. Otherwise, you wouldn't hesitate to offer examples of how to do it. Why would you? Why would you hesitate to offer examples to prove that you know what you're talking about? To demonstrate to someone else that you know how it can be done. I go on. If you truly believe your boss is begging for workers and there is work, there should be no issue in a guarantee of work. It's pretty simple logic, Bill. If your boss genuinely needs employers and he has viable employees, or boss needs employees, and he has viable employees who want to work, then there shouldn't be any problem with him issuing a guarantee of work. Unless he's someone who's not intending to treat them as a full-time worker or a part-time worker, and he's only looking for casual work. He's looking for someone to fill in and then jettison, to have a low retention of staff. Unless your boss is in some way fearful that the working conditions that he wants to subject his workforce to will result in a high turnover. In which case, he wouldn't qualify for a guarantee of work. He wouldn't be able to qualify for it because a guarantee of work would mean he would have to give some assurances that those employees that he takes on would have work for a significant period of time, for a significant number of hours, and the only thing that would prevent that is if that employee did something that made them unemployable, such as workplace harassment, such as inability to do the job effectively. Anything that would otherwise be a normal and reasonable fireable offence for. As I say, even asking him, how would it hurt you? What do you stand to lose, Bill? Explain that to me. Please explain that to me. Explain to me what you stand to lose by telling your boss you know someone who's looking for a job. As I say, sure I can and will apply for the work. I have. I actually had already done it. But here you are telling me to do whatever it takes to get a job. And yet you seem to be offended when I ask you to talk to your boss. Don't you think that's hypocritical? I'm taking an opportunity to get my foot in the door at your workplace, at a place you tell me your boss is looking for people to fill those jobs. And all you can proclaim is excuses, excuses, excuses. If you want to get back to the it sounds rehearsed point, Bill, your reliance on the word excuses, excuses sounds rehearsed. It sounds far more rehearsed than you can possibly imagine. In fact, in my experience, when I coach businesses, I talk about employees that have a tendency to talk about other employees as having constantly generating excuses, often do so as a way to deflect their own excuses. It's attention-seeking behaviour. It's a way of deflecting responsibility. It's a way of diminishing one's attachment to the same behaviours. But anyway, you go on. You say, you were different when I knew you up there, but you're really out there now. You've asked me to talk to my boss to give you a guarantee of work. You've asked me to pay to relocate you several times, along with me putting you up, but you can't. But you say you don't want a handout. Yes, Bill. Because if you read what I've written, I did ask you to talk to your boss. And I asked if your boss was willing to give a guarantee of work. That's a requirement of beginning finances to relocate. I haven't asked you to pay to relocate me several times. I've asked if you're volunteering to pay to relocate someone. Not just me, anyone. That was actually the very first response I had to you on your original post. Are you volunteering to pay? Not asking you to pay, I'm asking if you're volunteering. I'm asking if you are offering. Not will you, but are you offering, Bill? Not because I want you to pay. I'm just trying to get you to understand that logically, what you're asking requires money, and the money has to come from somewhere. And without a guarantee of work, it means either on Centerlink benefits, you must be able to earn enough money to save money to do what you're asking, or someone like yourself who wants to throw themselves into the fray, into this conversation, must be willing to then help. Otherwise, you don't have the right to talk, Bill. If you're not willing to help someone to relocate with money, and you're not willing to accept the fact that someone needs a guarantee of work to relocate through means that the government provides, and you are also willing to accept that people on Centerlink are only earning enough just to get by, then you have no right to say anything, Bill. You're complaining about something you're unwilling to change. You're complaining about something you're unwilling to address, to become part of the solution for. You're complaining for the sake of complaining. You're a squeaky wheel, Bill. You're a squeaky wheel. Maybe that's why you feel better. I really don't know. But you're making an awful lot of noise and you're not giving any practical examples of any solutions. As I said, you might as well say pray. Pray for a job and it'll happen. Pray for the money, it'll happen. I tell you what, Bill, there's a fantastic book you should read. It's called The Secret. You might have heard of it. It's a book about affirmating things into your life. If you understand the principle, it's very powerful. But for someone like yourself, maybe you'll find something that you can attach yourself to. You won't really understand it, I'm pretty sure of it. But you'll assume that it means that, putting your mind to it means it will happen. It means that without any practical advice, without any real solutions, without any lateral thinking, it'll just happen. Pray for it, it'll happen. Beg for it. Get on your knees. Do like the televangelists do on the TV. Shake about, dance, speak in tongues. Do whatever you need to do. It'll happen. You can make it happen. I mean, if you're not going to offer the money, if you're not going to give a practical way of getting a guarantee of work so that you can be assisted to get the money, and if you're going to accept that these people are only just getting enough to get by week to week, then you must be assuming that the money is somehow going to materialise out of thin air. Which any economist will tell you is not very practical, Bill. So it must mean that you subscribe to the ideology that by thinking hard enough and praying hard enough, being humble enough and being down on your hands and knees and begging enough, you'll be able to magically manifest the money and the means to meet your expectations. It's a lovely idea, Bill. It really is. And I'll tell you, I'm actually an advocate for the power of attraction. I believe it and I utilise it. But I will tell you something, it doesn't quite work like that. That's not the crux of it, Bill. That's not how it works in the real world. It does work, but that's not how it works in the real world. And unless you've spent the same amount of time as me studying it, you don't have the single clearest clue about it. But we'll go on. You go on, you say, I was different, You said it's not up to me to do anything for you. That's correct, Bill. I'm just putting you in the same basket you put people in Centerlink. If you're not willing to do something about it, shut the fuck up. That's what you said about people in Centerlink complaining. If it's not enough, shut the fuck up, do something about it. Well, guess what, Bill? If you're unhappy about the fact that I'm telling you that there are impediments to people being able to do what you're asking them to do, and you don't want to do anything about it, such as volunteer to pay for it, or be willing to ask your boss for a guarantee of work, or to even pass on those details so that your boss can make an informed decision about whether he wants to employ those people or not, then shut the fuck up, Bill. That's what you're asking other people to do. I'm just asking you to do the same. Shut the fuck up. If you're not willing to do anything to help, and you just want to complain, and you want to sit there and hit those same few beats that you go on and on about, excuses, handouts, then you're not contributing to anything. You say you're contributing, you say that you're working, you're paying tax and all that sort of stuff, and in your own way, yes, you are contributing, but you're not doing it in any real conscientious way, and you're doing it the whole time while complaining. Naughty, naughty, Bill. That's what you're asking other people not to do. Naughty, naughty. That is the definition of hypocritical, Bill. If you don't believe that, then let me know. Put it down in the comments, and I'll pull up a dictionary definition for you. You go on to say, if I was you, I'll try and read this right. If I was you, I would apply for a job elsewhere and apply Centerlink for relocation costs to gain employment. You have internet access despite not enough money for rent, food, fuel, school fees, etc., etc. So you can look for work elsewhere. You have a car, pull your finger out, and have a crack. Well, there's a couple of points here I want to make, Bill. I've already told you what's required to apply to Centerlink for relocation costs to gain employment. That's a guarantee of work, Bill. This is a conversation we've now had in Christ knows how many pages now. That is a requirement of that assistance from Centerlink to relocate, is a guarantee of work. And you're unwilling to even ask your boss about a guarantee of work. You seem to be offended by the very idea that someone would even ask about a guarantee of work. And yet here you are, in the very next sentence, in the very next paragraph, saying, if you were me, you would apply for a job elsewhere and apply to Centerlink for relocation costs. I've already explained to you, Bill, those relocation costs are only granted on the conditions of a guarantee of work. So can you please ratify that with your previous few postings where you say, why are you asking for a guarantee of work? Why should you get a handout? You've contradicted yourself already. Here's the other thing. You talk about applying for work outside of the local area, Bill. You've even made good points. You can do interviews over the phone. Guess what? If you want to look for work outside of your local area, do you know what the most cost-effective way of doing that is? Online. Using the internet. In fact, you can do Skype interviews, which a lot of employers really like. They certainly have a preference for Skype interviews than over the phone interviews. I know, because this is something I've implemented. I've been part of the IT industry as well. So your whole point here of you have internet access despite not enough money for rent, food, fuel, school fees, etc., etc. Saying look for work. Now maybe I'm misreading it, but in my head it sounds like you're trying to guilt me or make me feel in some way I'm uncomfortable about the fact that I have internet access. Guess what, Bill? I do. I do because it's the most efficient and effective way, cost-effective way, of looking for work outside of my local area, and also of purchasing things at a lower cost than I could possibly do otherwise, of keeping track of my daughter's school reports, because they're online now, Bill. They're online. Did you know that? Not all schools print them out. They will if you ask. But they have a tendency to do them electronically now. Save paper, save the environment. Holy shit, Bill. Did you know that? Have you reached the 2000s yet? Are you still getting teletexts? Is it strange to you that the internet is just as much a valuable commodity to have for an unemployed person as electricity, Bill? What's next? Are you going to say, holy fuck, motherfucker, how dare you be an unemployed person and have a mobile phone? How can you possibly afford a mobile phone, you fuck? Guess what? I have a mobile phone, Bill. Do you know how much I have on my mobile phone? It's about $30 a year I spend on my mobile phone. I use an Aldi prepaid. You put $30 on it, the credit's good for 365 days. Why? Because if a potential employer wants to contact me and say there's an interview, they can ring my mobile and I will get it wherever I am. I will get that instantaneously. If there is an accident at school and my daughter is injured, I will get that call instantaneously. No home phone. No letters. Sure, there are people, no doubt, on unemployment benefits who might use part of that unemployment benefits for luxuries they don't need. Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, maybe exorbitant gaming internet, running streams, running Steam, playing Halo all day. Sure, and as I've said before, you won't stop that, Bill. That is the nature of humanity. You will always find a very small portion of people who will abuse the system. But to have a conversation, to write in such a way as to suggest that somehow the internet access for an unemployed person is a luxury and they should in some way feel embarrassed, or somehow that they're misusing or misappropriating those funds, shows that you have not spent an iota of any time thinking about it. If I didn't have internet, Bill, and by the way, I pay $69 a month for my internet. That's the cheapest I could get on a 12-month contract. Why did I get a 12-month contract? Because I don't want to be locked into a contract in case anything goes wrong. Why do I have the internet, Bill? To look for work. To respond to emails. To electronically transfer my resume. To update my resume. To make these videos. Why do I make these videos, Bill? Well, you probably see most of the videos haven't been for much. But this one here, I hope will get monetized. I hope this will get my name out. Not the least of which, because if it gets monetized, at least I'm getting money from somewhere. And for that, I thank you. Because if I do get some money out of this, hopefully it'll be enough to be able to meet those expectations you have, Bill. And to be able to travel Australia-wide looking for work. Or to get work, or to go and meet the requirements for that work. If it's not enough, and look, let's be honest, the online marketplace is a fickle thing. There's a good chance this video will go up and I'll make no money. Or I might make $5. If I make no money, fine. It was something I tried, Bill. But it's got but people can look at this, they can listen to me, and they can make an assessment of whether I'm the sort of person that they want to employ. Because I have no problem putting this up. I have no problem exposing myself, what my experiences are, what my attitudes are, what my response is. I don't have any issues with putting that up because I'm confident in what I do. I'm confident in what I know. I'm confident in my experience. So, hey, it's another port of contact. If potential employer says, oh, what sort of person are you? I can point them to this video and say, if you get through all, who knows how many hours this will be, you'll have a pretty good idea of what I know, how I know it, what work experience I've got, what my attitude is, and how I deal with situations. But as I said, if I get a few $100s out of this, great. It gives me a pool of money to be able to travel for interviews or for jobs or whatever. If I don't get a couple of $100 out of it and I get $5 out of it, great. I'm going to have that takeaway coffee from this. Why? Well, because it would amuse me. Because honestly, that's why. Because it would amuse me to be able to turn around and say, thank you, Bill. Your little thing, this conversation we've had, has provided me with enough money to go and have a cup of coffee. That would amuse the hell out of me. I know it's not a very nice thing to do, and quite frankly, it's not something I would feel very comfortable with my employees saying, but I'm just being honest, it would amuse me somewhat. And besides, why not? Who am I hurting? Yeah, I didn't have that $5 before. I'll declare it with Centerlink. I'll let them know I got the $5 from ad revenue, from the monetization. If I get anything from it, I'll let them know. If they feel that it's worth taking the $5 out of what I get off Centerlink, if I'm still unemployed at the time, then I'll accept that. If not, if I'm working, well, even better, because that'll just be a bonus. You go on, pull my finger out and have a crack. The way you write things, Bill, you make so many presumptions in the way you write. If you read very carefully about the tense, past tense, future tense, that sort of thing, the way you use tense within your writing very clearly indicates that you feel, when you write these things, that no one is already undertaking those activities. When you say, pull your finger out and have a crack, you've written that as if that's not already happening. That is the tone and the tense of your text, of your dialogue. That's how you've written it. You've mentioned earlier about, it's a little bit presumptuous of me to somehow talk as if I know whether or not you're struggling or not, because I'm not privy to your circumstance. Guess what, Bill? That goes both ways. You have no idea the circumstance I'm in. You have no idea what I do on a day-to-day basis to look for work or look for means of money. But you clearly have an impression of what that is, just as I have an impression of how much you must be struggling. Because when you say pull your finger out and have a crack, that clearly indicates that you think that that's not already happening. Which is that's fair enough. That's your opinion. I'm not really going to sit here and try and convince you otherwise, because quite frankly, I don't think you care. I don't think you'd even be interested in what I do on a day-to-day basis to improve my living circumstances or provide a great example for my daughter. So I don't think you care. I think personally you've become very insular in your way of thinking. But I just find that amusing. You go on and say you've given two good paying job leads, go apply. You even then go and post seek again. Again, this proves that you're not reading what I've written. If you'd read what I'd written, you would have understood that I've already looked up those jobs. That's how I knew the location of the job was in South Australia. I don't remember the particular town, Blacktown or whatever it was. I'll find out. Border town. I was wrong. It's not Blacktown, it's Border town. But that's why I knew the location, Bill, because it was on the job. It was on the advertisement. And pull up my resume. Applied for those jobs. So again, you're writing as if these things aren't already happening, which is ridiculous, Bill. It's ridiculous. Because if you'd read what I'm writing, and believe me, Bill, I'm not a particularly fast typist. but I'm a very methodical typist because of the type of work I've done, because of the seminars that I perform, because of the coaching that I've done, because I've been a boss, because I've been someone who have employed other people, because I've been a manager. I've understood the value of taking a deliberate and pragmatic approach to how I write things, and I try the best I can to write them clearly in effective English. Now, obviously, I've made the mistake by asking you repeatedly if you're volunteering to pay money, because you've misconstrued that as if I'm asking for a handout, rather than understanding that the crux of that is not that I'm asking you for a handout, but whether I'm asking if you're even volunteering for that. Because that would be one of the options that would help people meet the expectations that you have. And if not, and this is sort of the point of why I'm asking it, then you have to try and explain how those people can meet those expectations that you're placing on them if you're not volunteering to help them. And not only that, by your own admission, you're not volunteering to help with even the inquiry for a guarantee of work. So obviously that's a mistake. I've misunderstood how astute you would be at the way that I've worded things. That's a mistake of mine. I don't blame you for that, because you know what? I didn't read the room and I didn't understand that you would not understand the way I've written that, and you know, a good part of that is on me because I simply did not either read the room or I have a skewed understanding of what sort of words and impression my words are giving. That's fair enough. But anyway, but I go on. Will Amos? I already have, meaning I've already applied for those jobs. You didn't read my words very well, though. I never asked you for a handout. This is something I've repeated again. I can understand why it sounds like rehearsal, Bill, because I'm repeating the same things that I've said to you again and again, just like you've repeated the same things to me. Excuses, excuses, and handouts. As I try to explain, I've just postulated that without a guarantee of work, and therefore government assistance, what am I supposed to do? Ask you? In other words, am I supposed to ask you for money, Bill? Without a guarantee of work, without that financial assistance by Centerlink to relocate, on an income that you've already accepted is just enough to get by, how else am I supposed to raise that money? By asking you? By asking if you're volunteering to give the money? I know you're not. I know that, Bill. That's why I said, short of a GoFundMe, which again, if you don't know what that is, Google it. But short of a GoFundMe, how else? Explain it. You obviously think you're knowledgeable. Explain it. Demonstrate it. Prove it. As I go on to say, you sound like more of a victim than the people the poll were about. The people were just expressing that they were felt stretched thin on the money that they were getting from Centerlink benefits. And yet the impression I get from the way you write things is you feel that your job is threatened. You feel a lack of confidence to pass on potential job seekers to your boss, to even inquire with your boss about a guarantee of work, given the fact that you've even said your boss is looking for someone to work. I've given you direct sources to facts. I say fingers, but it's supposed to be facts and figures regarding the job market. Sorry, Bill, spelling's not my strong point. I've also given you facts and figures with regards to Newstart and the cost of relocating, yet you've not provided one practical example of how to do what you're asking without a guarantee of work. Does this mean you do not know how? Or is it that you want to keep your employment safe by not helping others into the workforce? Honestly, telling someone to do it without offering help, if you know a way to do it, as you say you do, is as empty as prayers for the dying. I've already said that earlier in this video. But that's exactly what it is. If you do not have a practical solution, Bill, they're empty words. They mean nothing. You might as well be praying for the dying in foreign countries or in New Zealand. You might as well be praying for them, because that's As good as words are. You go on, now here's a cracker. This is where I really start to be quite amused by this whole thing, and I'm very sorry. I shouldn't find this as amusing as I do, but I genuinely find this is the point where I start to feel a little bit dickish towards you, because I'm just amused by the whole thing by this point. You say, no wonder you're unemployed, your attitude is terrible. That's your opinion, Bill, that's fine. You know, if you haven't worked out what my opinion of you is, I can tell you it dropped immediately as soon as I read that, even further than it already was. You said, I wouldn't recommend you to my boss, or any employee for that matter. You can stay in Winton and rot for all I care. Very compassionate, Bill. That's fantastic. Do you know what this is, Bill? This is the sort of reaction I would expect from a toddler. Someone who feels like, you know, that they don't have any pragmatic or conceivable way of justifying their point. So they just go, well, I don't like you. Fuck off. I hate you. I hope you die. I mean, really, you've written it out far more eloquently than that, but that's certainly the crux of what you've written there. It sounds like the tantrum of a toddler. And it actually took me a little bit by surprise, because I did not think that you would take my repeated requests for you to demonstrate, to show, to explain how people can meet those expectations as being personal. So I did respond, wow, you sound really hurt. Are you okay? Because I genuinely was wondering, are you okay? Because that reaction is unreal. It's amusing to me, and I hate to say that, but it is. It's unreal. And so, you know, as I explained, you seem to have taken things personal when all I have asked is for you to provide proof of how to do what you're asking others to do. I'm not suffering. My life is great right now. And you know what? My life is the best it's been in years. Even though I'm not working. And as I say later, if I got a job, even better. But at the moment, you know, I can't complain. My life is great. It really is. Actually, that's what I say. Look, I haven't even written it, but that's what I say next. My life is great right now. If I can get work, even better, but certainly I'm not suffering the type of hardships that some are. You sound wounded that I've asked you to give details about how you would approach the situation. And I would bet your job on the fact that if I spoke to your boss on the phone, he would not feel the same way about you. You know what, Bill? I tell you how sure of that I am. You have an open invitation. You don't have to publicly post it here, but you're most welcome to either pass my phone number on to your boss, and I'm not going to say it on this video, but if you want it, I will send it to you. Or you can give me your boss's phone number, and I will talk to your boss on the phone. You can even tell your boss any nasty thing you like about me. You can make up bullshit about me. You can tell him whatever you like, and I wouldn't be surprised if you do. You can. But I guarantee if I have a reasonable and civil conversation with your boss on the phone, your boss would not have the same attitude that you do towards me. I know that, Bill. I know that because I've worked in your boss's position. I don't know what your boss is doing, but I've been a boss. I've been an employee. Being a business coach, I know the requirements of talking to people in those positions. I've done it. I know what the expectations are. I'll go on. You say you're flexible, but your tone sounds defensive and cornered. I think that's pretty simple. And I think that's pretty obvious. You say you're flexible. You can't even give a lateral example of how to address the impediments that I brought up with relocating. I continue on and say, don't take it personal. I'm only trying to understand how you expect people to do what you're asking of them. Now at this point, anyone who happens to be looking can see that this is at which point I did a screen capture of this conversation, because as you can see, it says 11 hours from when I did that particular post. I didn't realise at the time that you were going to respond. I basically got to the point where I thought, you must have decided, obviously from your previous comment, stay and wit and rot for all I care, that you gave up on the conversation, you decided to leave and you weren't going to respond. So I thought, fine, I'll take a screenshot of this conversation as it is in front of us. And so that's what I did. Not realising that after I had done this, you'd actually responded. Now, if you give me half a minute, I'll go and find those responses. I'll just have to bring them up on another computer. So here is what you responded after this point. Now obviously I don't have this on the PDF that I've screenshot, but anyone who wishes to, they're certainly welcome to go and have a look at the actual post, the Facebook post, and they'll see this, right? After I said, don't take it personal, I'm only trying to understand how you expect people to do what you're asking them. Your response is, you're not worth the time. At the end of the day, I'll keep working to maintain my lifestyle and contribute. You won't, and that's the difference. So that's a very interesting response, Bill. Again, you're making presumptions. You're presuming what I'm doing. But anyway, now, a friend of mine has entered in and said boomers. I'm guessing he means baby boomers. Now, I don't think you and I are baby boomers, but I thought that was funny anyway. So I liked it. I then come on and I respond in kind, and I say, you're making the assumption that I won't ever find work again, or that I have not contributed through work before. I find it a bit rich how entitled you sound. By your own admission, if your boss was to lose their business and could not find work locally, they should potentially sell their business at a loss, relocate to an area with more work, along with thousands of other people, with a 1 in 15 chance of ever having a job to apply for, without a guarantee of work for assistance, and they should shut up and suck it up. I wonder if you feel confident enough to tell your boss that to their face. Or let them read this. And hey, if you want to let your boss read this, go for it. Your inability to offer a practical solution to what you're asking others to do, your inability to handle critical discourse with others, and clear contempt for the hard facts provided are all here online, publicly, for your boss to read. And now there's video. So really, Bill, if you feel that confident in your position, and you feel that your boss would have the sort of attitude towards me that you obviously have, then you're most welcome to let your boss read this. You're most welcome to let your boss watch this video. I have no problems with that. We'll go on. I can tell you, as someone who has owned businesses, managed businesses, and contributes to the community through volunteering with various groups here, even though I'm unemployed, your posts do not look very attractive. If I was to come across these responses online as a prospective employer, I would leave with the impression that you can't handle criticism, scrutiny, or even understand facts and figures. I think that's pretty clear, Bill. That in itself would not be enough, but you can't even demonstrate lateral thinking and offer a solution to what you are asking others to do. Your default response is to criticise and are unwilling to help others. I hope your boss knows you better or that they never read this because with the ineptitude you have shown and combative attitude you have displayed, you would not have been employed long under my employment. That's true, Bill. All of that is true. You would not have lasted very long if I was your boss with that sort of attitude. You're unwilling to help people, Bill. It's a key component of a working environment. Unless you're working by yourself. You don't handle criticism. That's pretty clear. You've gotten to the point where you're basically name-calling. Where you're responding in the way I would expect of a toddler. As someone who's 40 plus years of age, I'd expect better. And certainly someone who's been in the workforce, I would expect you to handle criticism a little bit better than that. I think it's pretty clear you have no respect for facts and figures. I provided them to you. In front of you. I've sent them to you. I've sent you links. I've given you direct information. Not information from me, information from the relative third parties for you to digest and to offer solutions to. You haven't even demonstrated the ability to think laterally and give me a solution to what you're asking people to do. Your next response, Bill, you say, you really are just an idiot, Andrew. I notice you have deleted a lot of your comments too. Best of luck to you. You really are where you deserve to be. And the interesting thing, and this actually took me by surprise, Bill, was the comment that I've deleted a lot of my comments. I've not deleted any of my comments, Bill. I'm not even sure if I can. If I look at it, it says like and reply. I could be wrong. Let me have a look. Oh, I stand corrected. Actually, yes, you can. You can edit or delete. There's 3 little dots come up on the right. You can, but no, I haven't deleted the comments, and why would I? I don't see any. I mean, you can see the abundance of replies that I've given to your thread, to your conversation. So holy shit, Bill, I must have written an awful lot if I've deleted a whole lot of it. I mean, honestly, I must have written at least 5 or 6 times what you can see in front of you. That's a fucking lot, Bill. As I said, I'm not that fast a typist. That's great. I think this is clearly, this is a bit of deflection. This is a bit of misdirection on your part. I think you've come to the realization that you're talking out your arse, Bill, and you're trying as best as you can to extradite yourself from the situation while trying to save face. That's fine. And if that's the case, that's fine. As I said, I'm not interested in attacking you personally. But anyway, I decided I would respond. And that's because at this point, this is when I found out that you'd actually responded to what you can see on the screen in front of you now. Because I didn't realise that. I thought you'd finished talking. And then when I came up to have a look, because I was going to let you know that I was making a video, making these videos in fact. And I wanted to let you know. That's when I come across those messages. So I asked, what comments have I deleted? I don't think it's me that needs the luck. It's pretty clear you're the one who's struggling, and I think that's very obvious. Thank you though, you have given me the opportunity to take this thread, make use of it, and maybe even make money on it. And as I said, after the part of the conversation that you can see on your screen, and will be in the link in the comments, that's what I decided. I thought, this is a fantastic opportunity to analyse this conversation, to try and put it in some social context, to try and understand what's happening during this conversation, and potentially monetize it. That wasn't my first thought, but once I started to think about it and doing the video, I thought, well, why not monetize it? It's one way to make money, Bill. I'm taking advantage of the situation, and as I said, there is a part of me that's very bemused by the fact that I'm potentially taking your comments and monetizing them. That does bemuse me somewhat. But anyway, we go on. My last comment, and this is the last one that I've seen as of right now when I'm making this video, which is on a Sunday night at 11:24. Tell you the date too. March 31st, 1990. Okay, this is the last message that I've sent, and as far as to the best of my knowledge, you haven't responded since. I say, you are right. I do deserve to be where I am. Like I said, my life is good. Given how bitter you seem to be, I guess you're where you deserve to be too. Now, I've talked at length. I never intended to make these videos as long as they are. And I suspect this is probably a byproduct of spending a lot of time on stage in seminars doing coaching. Because a lot of the times you're talking for, you can do 3-hour days, you can do 6-hour days with multiple breaks. So maybe that's part of it. Or maybe I just talk a lot. That's a good possibility too, But this is where the conversation had finished when I started doing the first video yesterday. This is where we are today. Those last few messages. Which I find pretty telling. You've got to the point now, during this conversation, even though I have asked you, and I thought I was being pretty civil, I've asked you just to explain how you expect people to meet those expectations you have, given the circumstances they're in, given the hard facts and figures that I've provided to you, and you've got to the point where your half of the conversation has evolved from what sounds very rehearsed, which is, why should I give a handout, why should I give a handout, why should I give a handout, to excuses, and devolved into something that basically gets to the point where you go, stay in Winton for all I care. Rot, I think was the last one. I don't know, I'll put that computer down now. I think this shows, Bill, that under pressure you don't perform very well. Not that I was putting pressure on you. I certainly didn't think I was. I was just asking you a simple question. It is a simple question. The answer may not be simple, and I recognise that the answer is not simple. The answer is not simple. I know this because I've thought about the answer at length. And as I said, I haven't come up with a practical, demonstrable, repeatable solution of my own. But you say it can be done. And the answer is very simple, Bill. How can it be done? If those are the facts and figures, if that is what people on unemployment benefits are faced with, if that's how much they earn, and if the requirements of getting further assistance is a guarantee of work, and people like yourself are not going to volunteer to subsidise that cost, how do people meet that expectation that they should relocate from where they are to where there's more work? You say that's what you want people to do. That was your very first point. If you don't like being unemployed and you think it's too tough, get a job. If there's no jobs where you are, move. That was your very first post. I'm paraphrasing because I suppose I could scroll back. I'll scroll back. Why not? We'll scroll back. We'll go to the very first post you said. Here it is. Here's a novel idea. To get more money, get a job. Boom. That's your first line, Bill. Second line, no jobs in your area, move somewhere so you can get a job. This whole thread has been born out of that single post that you put there to start with. All I've asked from that point in the last 2 days is explain how does someone who has already expressed that they're only just getting by on Centerlink meet the expectations that you have. You have come back and said, I did it. You've come back and said, it can be done. I'm not going to argue whether that is the case or not. I personally don't see a solution for every circumstance in which it can be done. But you say it can, and you say you've done it. So as I've said, I defer to you. Explain it, demonstrate it, show it, Put a plan there. Show not just myself, but anyone else who happens to be reading this online, who is in a situation where they are currently unable to get a job in their local area. Explain to them how they can relocate to an area where there is more work and how that can work for them. On top of that, during this course of this conversation, I've also brought up the fact that there are more job seekers than there are jobs. They aren't my facts and figures, Bill. They are from the Bureau of Statistics. So then I postulated the question. If there are more job seekers than there are jobs, regardless of skill required for the jobs, and regardless of the willingness of the unemployed people to work, if everyone was willing to work any job that they could get, and they could get any job that was available regardless of their skill level, there is still not enough jobs for everyone. Then why do these people not have the right to express that they are struggling on unemployment benefits or on Centerlink benefits? Why do you feel it's right for you to have an attitude where they should shut the fuck up? I really want to understand that. I also want to understand why you think it's appropriate to say these things to someone who's in their later years. I mean, working age is, 16, 17 to 65, Bill? That's what it is. Explain to me how you expect someone who's 40 plus, it could be younger, but let's say someone who's 40 plus years old, who own their own house, who are potentially in an area with an ever decreasing economic situation in their town because people are leaving to go get more work. How are they supposed to sell their house at a loss, to relocate to another town, to get a job, to compete with other people, particularly at advanced ages, 60 plus, right? Or are they supposed to maintain their house, pay rates where they can't live, then rent another place in another area? They certainly are unlikely to be able to rent it because, as I said, depressed, contracting economy in those local areas. How do they do that, Bill? And how do you justify that attitude towards people who have been in the workforce, who've already contributed their taxes to your schooling, to your roads, to your infrastructure that you take advantage of day to day, and still have the attitude of, why the fuck should taxpayers be paying to assist people? I really want to understand that. I really want to hear from anyone who is in that situation, who has worked for 40 years, now can't get a job, whether it's due to ageism or loss of industry contraction, loss of job, whatever it may be, and now they're struggling to get a job, and they've got commitments, Bill, they've got responsibilities, they've got homes, they've got kids, they've got all these sorts of things, and yet you want them to either relinquish what they've already worked very hard for in their life, at a loss, to relocate to meet some ideal expectation that you have, or that they should double or triple their burden by relocating, taking on rentals in areas where the rent will increase because the demand for rental properties will increase, because more people are moving there because of the job availability, while still maintaining rates and maintenance costs on homes that they own that they can't rent because these other areas have now got a depressed economy, because no one wants to rent there, because no one wants to move there, because there is no jobs. Explain it. Demonstrate it. As I said, if you want, I will personally fund butcher paper and a texter for you to draw it out in a picture that's the size of a wall if that's really what you need to do, Bill. If you need to draw cartoons to explain your point because you're not eloquent with words, that's fine. I've done that. I've done that in coaching. I've been on stages where there's whiteboards, where there's projectors and there's presentation boards, and I've drawn stuff. I've written it out in big letters. I've broken it down into the simplest possible terms. Because some people, they don't understand complexity. They need simplified ideas. If that's you, if you can't explain it in the same terms that I have, that's fine. Explain it in your own terms, but explain it. Demonstrate it. Prove it. Back up what you're asking other people to do with facts and figures. Demonstrate it. Show it. Give a plan. Because I tell you what, Bill, you would not have thrived under my employment because you've demonstrated to me that you can't do that. You've demonstrated that if I gave you a task, if I gave you a project and said, I need you to work this out, I need you to do this, I need you to complete this, or I need you at least to be comfortable enough to admit that you can't, or that you need help, what you've written, what you've expressed, would leave me with the impression that there is no fucking way I would give you that project. Because it's pretty clear you can't plan, or you're unwilling to plan, or you don't know how to plan, or you are unable to admit when you don't have the answers, or you're willing to fabricate, misdirect, and suggest that you do when you don't, to save face. Now you can say, well, you're not a boss anymore. Because right now, I'm not a boss. I'm not a manager, I'm not. I'll tell you what, that doesn't mean it's not going to be the case in 6 months, Bill. But yes, right now I'm not. As I said, I have, I still do product broking and that sort of thing, but, I'm not in a high managerial position. Technically, I don't consider myself a business owner at this point. I'm not turning over enough revenue to be considered a business. But really turning over any revenue. I'm doing in order to help maintain the lifestyle I have on the money that I have. And because of my daughter, I'm in a position where I would much prefer to work for someone else right now than undertake the large requirements required to try and thrive in an ever-contracting working environment, undertaking a business without a plan B. So you can say, hey, you're not a boss anymore, so what you're saying wouldn't mean jack shit to me. Why would I care? That's right. And that's your opinion. You can say that. I don't care. I said you can belittle me all you like. You see, you have to understand, Bill. Not only have I worked for bosses, as in I've been their employee, I've been a boss. More than once, Bill. Not only that, but I've coached them, Bill. That is something that I've done. And I'm bloody sure that's something you haven't. That's very obvious to me. I have probably I would suggest I've been in contact with more employers than you have in your entire life, and I would be willing to place money on that. Just on the merits that I have, that's what part of my career was. That's part of what my job was to go into individual businesses, to coach them, to deal with those managers, those supervisors, those bosses, and those employees on a day-to-day basis. So whether I would employ you or not really doesn't mean anything to you, and that's fine. Don't begrudge that. As I said, maybe you have a better rapport with your boss. Maybe your boss doesn't see what I see. That's a possibility too. I certainly hope that's the case, because I certainly don't want to take your job away from you. I don't want you to be unemployed. I don't. Might sound like it, but I don't. You know, good. I really do hope you get all the way through to retirement age without any issues and you can retire and you live your best life. Where I have an issue, Bill, is the sheer level of arrogance that you demonstrate in trying to speak for other people, and trying to impose your will and your expectation on other people, when you clearly do not have a grasp on the reality of the situation. What I find even more offensive is how much you talk down to people who have been in the workforce and now, through no fault of their own, can't get a job. Whether it's because of age, injury, industry contraction, or any number of things. You have such a sense of entitlement about the way you write, that somehow the tax that you pay is more worthy than the tax that others have paid before you. There's an interesting thing that struck me when I read this conversation, Bill, when I participated in this conversation with you. I believe, personally, that you suffer from a condition that we're very well aware of in the coaching industry, which is called the Dunning-Kruger effect. If you don't know what the Dunning-Kruger effect, you can Google it. But in short, the Dunning-Kruger effect is basically the effect that those people who know the least believe they know more than everyone else. And the more that you know about a particular subject, the less you believe you know, because you have an understanding that you're constantly learning. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that's basically what it is. When it comes to coaching, it's something that we sort of impress upon. That the minute you think you know everything, you've stagnated and you don't know anything, because you should always be in a constant state of learning. Because as long as you enter into things with the understanding that you don't have all the answers and that you don't know everything, it's the smarter you become. The moment you think that you know better than anyone else, you know less. That's the Dunning-Kruger effect. Don't take my word for it, Bill. Please don't take my word for it. Google it. You won't read it or understand it, I imagine, because you're not really interested in that. You have this superiority complex about you, and that is a side effect of the Dunning-Kruger effect. But for anyone else who wants to look it up, go for it. It's the same as when you seem to have this attitude that's born out of a large amount of correlation versus causation, Bill. You seem to correlate that someone who was on unemployment benefits doesn't want to work, or isn't trying to do something, or isn't making every effort to do so, and that there are legitimate impediments to them being able to do what you're expecting them to do. That's the difference between an excuse and an impediment, Bill. What you call an excuse, that's correlation. You see people's excuses as a correlation. You say, well, these people are making excuses, that's why they're not getting anywhere, and that's perfectly valid. Causation is not an excuse, though. It means there is a legitimate impediment to why these people can't do what you're asking them to do. The real truth of the matter is, you've revealed to me during this conversation you have a son. Now, it might not mean anything to you, but I genuinely feel a little bit of concern for your son. Because I believe that your understanding of the reality of the situation and the way that the job market is progressing is completely detached from reality. And I think that if you impress upon your son the sort of ideology you have, it'll be good, it'll certainly be valuable, but I also think it will ultimately fail your son in an ever-contracting job market unless they're highly skilled. Because as each year goes by, more and more becomes automated. More and more low-skilled or unskilled positions are replaced by automation and by computing. And more, there is a discrepancy between the number of job seekers looking for work and job availability. Don't take my word for it, Bill. I know what I know because of my experience, but I don't expect you to take it as gospel. Go ask an economist. Go read the Australian Bureau of Statistics. Do research. Experience life, Bill. Experience life. Not just your own. You're living in a bubble, I believe. I personally think you're living in a bubble. You're living in such an insulated thinking that you can't empathise with other people because you don't have the experience, and not only that, you don't have the capacity to live life in the moment and understand how people deal with things on a day-to-day basis. You don't know how to do it. Now, once again, I've been talking for 3 hours and 20 minutes. And I do think that I should probably stop. Because I've said basically what I want to say. The whole point of this very long-winded and probably over-talky live stream videos is that I want to have a conversation. I don't think Bill will want to have a conversation with me anymore, and that's fine. If he does, that's great. I'm open to it as well. But I genuinely want to know what anyone else thinks. Whether anyone else has a solution to what he's proposing, any ulterior methodologies or comments about hardships they may have faced or are facing, circumstances they're in, where the sort of expectations that are being placed upon them by people like Bill is unrealistic, detached from reality. I want to know how people feel about having been long-term employed workers contributing to the tax system who may not have a job now, and how they feel about the type of attitude that they might feel they're getting from people like Bill, that they should relinquish their house or safety or security or any of these sorts of things in a pursuit for work when there is a very clear statistical example that there are not enough jobs for everyone, with the understanding that anyone who's been in the workforce long enough and worked in enough industries long enough and been in enough different jobs long enough to know that despite your enthusiasm, despite your skills, despite your best efforts, there will still be work that people will be given in preference over yourself because they meet the expectations that the employer wants. Whether that's because they're younger, they're a different sex, they're local as opposed to from outside the town, whether it's because they still have a job and you've been long time unemployed, whatever it may be. I want to know. I've spent 6+ hours, probably 7 hours now, talking about this one conversation, which wasn't my intent. I really did expect to take an hour at most. But anyway, I can talk. And, frustrating thing to me is I want a conversation. I want a conversation about this. I think I've said over and over again what my response is to Bill, what I think are the flaws in his thinking, in his expectations, and how I think there is a gap in his attitude between the reality and his expectations. But I do genuinely want to know from anyone else what they feel, what they think, what circumstances they're in, what they can contribute to the conversation. So if you want to contribute to the conversation, please do. You know, leave a message, leave a comment, do whatever you like, do whatever you want to do. And if you want to read the text that I have saved as a PDF of that particular thread, you're welcome to do it, and you'll see obviously the poll that's there as well. You'll even see that I've put a link to an additional YouTube video which helps to get a little bit into you know, what you get from Centerlink, what it equates to. So yeah, let me know. That's basically where I want to end it. It's about 10 minutes to midnight at this point, so yeah, I probably should end it. So, thanks very much, everyone. If you've managed to listen to it this far, I apologise. It's been very long. And obviously there's been a few expletives launch out of my mouth. And not only that, you've no doubt heard me correct myself repeatedly, because I do have a tendency to get employer and employee mixed up in the excitement of the moment and things like that. So yeah, you know, but thanks very much.